By spring 1991, Pamela Sweeney's life appeared to be turning a hopeful corner. After a difficult divorce, she remained resilient, raising her son, keeping a steady job, and beginning a new relationship with the dream of rebuilding her family. But in the early hours of May 31, those fragile hopes were devastated by tragedy. A panicked phone call quickly turned into the most horrific crime scene investigators in Andover, Minnesota had ever seen. Pamela had been shot multiple times and stabbed repeatedly, her body bearing both gunshot and fatal stab wounds. Blood splattered across the room, staining the walls, ceiling, and soaking the bed. The brutality of the attack raised questions not only who killed Pamela, but also why such a gentle, devoted woman had become the victim of such a terrible rage. Following the contradictions and clues, detectives gradually uncover a haunting story of twisted infatuation, dangerous indifference, and violence lurking in everyday life. Pamela's case is not only a reminder of the consequences of a maniacal stalker, but also a heartbreaking testament to the failure of warnings that go unnoticed until it's too late to save a life. By 1991, 35 years old, Pamela Sweeney was divorced and had a son, Tony, from a previous marriage. She was known as a hardworking, positive person who worked as a secretary at a computer company and did everything she could for her child. She had been dating Larry for about 6 months and hoped to start a new family with him. Larry seemed like an ideal partner, calm, pleasant, and attentive. He bonded quickly with Tony, likely because he had children from a previous relationship and had always been a caring father. Larry worked in construction and had recently been tied up with a major project that kept him working late. Although he and Pamela still live separately, they planned to move in together and spend most of their free time together around 3:00 a.m. on Friday, May 31, 1991. Emergency services in Andover, Minnesota, received a 911 call from a frightened Larry. He said Pamela had been attacked and that her son, Tony, was not home. Larry said he had stayed late at work, planning to visit Pamela the next morning to spend the weekend together. However, during the night, while he was still at work, Pamela called him in a frightened, urgent voice, telling him to come immediately because someone had broken in, and she feared for her life. He told her to lock herself in a room and call the police, but he couldn't leave immediately due to work and the long drive. When Larry arrived at Pamela's house, she didn't answer the door despite his knocking and ringing. The front door was unlocked. Inside, he saw blood on the hallway floor. He called out to her, got no response, and searched the rooms. When he reached the bedroom, he saw blood splattered on the wall and Pamela lying unconscious on the bed, the sheet soaked in blood, her body draped across the bed. He said he heard a noise, panicked, and ran to a neighbor's house to call the police, fearing the attacker might still be inside. Over the phone, the operator noticed that Larry was very scared and upset, so he immediately sent the police to the scene. Larry believed Pamela had suffered fatal injuries. He also reported seeing an unfamiliar man standing near her house just before he arrived. After calling 911, Larry returned to the house and waited for the police. Minutes later, dispatch received a second call from Patrick Walsh. He says his co-worker was murdered and claims he witnessed the attack, accusing Pamela's fiancé, Larry, of being responsible. He added that the killer was still inside the house and urged swift action. Unlike Larry, Patrick sounded calm and composed. The two conflicting calls caught the attention of law enforcement. When officers reached the scene, they encountered Larry first. Patrick arrived shortly afterward. While some officers inspected Pamela's home, others questioned the two men. Patrick said he had spent the evening and night at a local bar, drinking and playing pool with friends, and returned home late. According to Patrick, he often drove past Pamela's house on his usual route. They were co-workers who had worked together for 10 years and had a friendly, communicative relationship that also benefited their work. As he passed by that night, he noticed her porch light was on, unusual for the hour, so he stopped to check on her. He then saw the front door open, which made him suspicious. From there, his account matched Larry's. He said he knocked and rang the bell with no response, then entered through the open door. Inside, he said he saw blood in the hallway and found a bloody body in the bedroom. Frightened, he shook Pamela to see if she was alive. When she didn't respond, he panicked and ran to the neighbors to call the police. Patrick also claimed that as he fled, he saw a man leaving through the back door, whom he identified as Larry. From the start, Patrick's story raised concerns. His emphasis on the matter of touching the corpse is particularly troubling, because it could be seen as a way to justify why his traces appeared on Pamela's body. Police found a horrifying scene in the Sweeney home. The master bedroom was covered in blood, spatter reached the walls and even the ceiling, indicating extreme violence. The bedding was soaked, yet there were no signs of forced entry or a struggle elsewhere in the house. These facts seem to contradict each other. Pamela's fiancé, Larry, and her co-worker, Patrick, quickly became prime suspects and were taken in for questioning. Larry said he didn't know Patrick. Patrick claimed he had seen Larry several times. Investigators also need to explain why both men showed up at Pamela's house at 3 a.m. A coincidence that seems unlikely. When Larry learns that a co-worker visited Pamela late at night, he immediately suspects Patrick. He theorizes that Patrick broke into the house, scaring Pamela, and she called him for help, but without evidence. It was only speculation. Detectives examined the house. There were no signs of a break-in. Locks and windows were intact. They found several bullet holes in the hallway, furniture, and blood spatter on the hallway floor, as well as heavy blood in the bedroom. The position of the body didn't match early theories, so they began reconstructing events using the blood spatter trajectories. First, they asked what Pamela was doing when attacked. With no forced entry, investigators wondered whether Larry was trying to create an alibi. If Pamela was afraid, why let her attacker involuntarily? They traced a call she made to Larry from her home phone, but the content of the conversation was unknown. So Larry remained a suspect. The autopsy revealed Pamela had been shot 4 times and stabbed 4 times, with deep wounds to the neck and upper chest. The exact cause of death could not be determined. Either the gunshots or the stabbings could have been fatal without immediate medical care. The blood patterns suggested the 2 weapons were used in different parts of the house. The reconstruction indicated shots were fired in the hallway, and the stabbing occurred in the bedroom. However, there were no signs that a wounded person moved from the hallway to the bedroom, nor evidence that she was carried there. Adding to the mystery, given these contradictions, police could not charge either suspect initially. They questioned both men and released them, then continued the investigation by interviewing Sweeney's family and co-workers, focusing on her relationships with Larry and Patrick. They first met Pamela's mother and stepfather, then began looking for her ex-husband, Mike. Her parents believed he was responsible, but their only supporting claim was that he collected firearms. According to her mother, he owned about 30 weapons, including pistols and rifles of various types. Further investigation found no motive for Mike. He and Pamela had no serious issues during their marriage and remained on good terms after the divorce. Mike was visibly shaken when speaking with police, appeared genuinely upset about Pamela's death, and seemed focused on finding the killer. He was especially worried about their son, Tony, now without a mother. Even though investigators did not rule him out, because 2 different weapons were used, and the body had been moved, detectives considered the possibility of two perpetrators. They canvassed the neighborhood, hoping someone had heard gunshots or seen anything unusual. But no one had. Investigators learned that the day before her death, Pamela had taken her 5-year-old son, Tony, to her parents' home because she was feeling unwell and wanted to rest. Forensics processed the scene overnight. At dawn, detectives examined the yard to determine the killer's approach, escape route, or whether the killer had ever left. They noticed a faint path pressed into the grass. Following it led them into a small wooded area behind the backyard. There, they found a knife stuck blade first in the ground and a pistol. Both had been carefully wiped clean before being discarded. Police suspected these were the murder weapons. Lab results confirmed it. The knife matched the one used to stab Pamela, and it had been taken from her kitchen. Ballistics showed the pistol found was the gun used to shoot her. Near the woods, they also found a pickup truck stuck in the mud. A license plate check showed the truck belonged to Patrick. He claimed he'd gotten stuck on a washed-out road while hurrying home and had left the truck to report it to police. This allowed the police to search the vehicle, at least on the outside. Inside, they saw candy wrappers. One detective remembered seeing the same kind of candy in Pamela's house that night, and on the porch, he returned to the scene and retrieved an open box of the same candy. Patrick later said he barely remembered anything after discovering Pamela's body and suggested he might have taken a candy to calm his nerves. But since the box wasn't in plain sight and there were many wrappers, that explanation seemed unlikely and increased suspicion. While Patrick and Larry were at the station, detectives examined their clothing. Both had spots resembling blood. Patrick said he shook Pamela when he called 911, and Larry said he never touched Pamela, so it's unclear how the blood got to him. Still, none of this was enough for charges. Because there was a small amount of blood on Larry's shoe, detectives assumed he had accidentally stepped on it. Both men's statements needed verification, but solid evidence was lacking. By the end of day one, 3 main suspects remained: ex-husband Mike, fiancé Larry, and colleague Patrick. Mike quickly offered an alibi. He said he'd been relaxing with friends the night of the attack, and they confirmed it. Patrick's claim that he was at a bar could not be verified. After speaking with Mike and confirming his alibi, Pamela's family shifted their suspicions. At first, they had focused on Mike. Now they suspected Patrick. Pamela's mother recalls her daughter complaining that Patrick harassed her at work, and not just at work. Pamela told her mother that Patrick had shoveled snow and mowed her lawn many times without being asked. In that context, Patrick's story that he just happened to drive by and was drawn in by the porch light sounded increasingly unconvincing. Pamela's best friend helped steer the investigation in the right direction. She told detectives that Patrick was not Pamela's friend. They barely interacted at work, and he had actually been stalking her for months. Pamela and Patrick had worked together for about 10 years. Patrick had long been attracted to Pamela, and his feelings intensified over time. Recently, his behavior became disturbingly obsessive. Some co-workers even described him as obsessed and called him a psychopath. The frightening anonymous calls began about 6 months before the murder. Once Pamela realized who was behind them, she reported it to the police. She filed several reports, but detectives concluded Patrick hadn't committed a chargeable offense. Since his actions didn't meet the legal definition of a crime, the police took no action, though the reports were logged, preserving a record of the stalking. These records reinforce Pamela's best friend's testimony and add to the suspicion surrounding Patrick. Desperate after the police did nothing, Pamela sought help from her pastor. She attended church regularly and knew him well. She confided in him, saying she feared a stalker. At the same time, suspicion began to grow around Larry as well. His claim that he'd never met or heard of Patrick now seemed odd. Didn't Pamela tell Larry that she was being harassed by a co-worker? Later, Larry told detectives he did remember Pamela mentioning a man who was bothering her, but they hadn't discussed details, and he hadn't realized how serious it was. His revised account seemed questionable, but he appeared sincere. Forensic testing then came back on the pistol and knife, but both had been thoroughly wiped clean, leaving no fingerprints or usable trace evidence. Investigators shifted their focus to Patrick and seized his clothing for analysis. They were especially interested in his pants, shirt, and boots, which had soil and plant material on the soles. A lab analysis could reveal whether he had truly gotten stuck in his car, as he claimed, or whether he had been trying to flee. This seemed promising, but the local lab lacked specialists to properly evaluate the samples. The police turned to the University of Minnesota for expert help. Experts discovered weed seeds clinging to Patrick's boots and assessed that in the United States, it's rare to let weeds grow rampant, so it's unlikely they originated from his home. Tire treads also showed impressions from trees, contradicting Patrick's account that he got stuck near a dirt road exit. In reality, he had been driving through a wooded area. This evidence connected him to the wooded area behind Pamela's house, where the knife and gun were found. A search of Patrick's home and car, under warrant, confirmed there were no similar plants or trees on his property, indicating he had indeed been in the forest. Investigators then revisited Patrick's claim that he touched Pamela's body when he found her. They closely examined his clothing and the shoe prints at the scene. Forensic experts concluded the pattern and volume of blood on his clothes did not match his story. The fabric appeared fully saturated, consistent with prolonged, close contact, such as carrying or moving a bleeding body. This supported the theory that Patrick entered the house, shot Pamela multiple times in the hallway, then continued the attack in the bedroom. When a blood spatter expert examined Patrick's trousers, he immediately noticed a pattern resembling stains seen on soldiers who carry the wounded off a battlefield. This explained the absence of blood in the hallway. The blood had stayed on the killer's clothing. Patrick's shirt showed a different pattern, high-velocity splatter, indicating violent force. Such patterns occur only if the victim is attacked while the heart is still pumping. Matching soap-like spatter was also found on the bedroom walls and bedding. Reinforcing this conclusion, Larry, by contrast, had no blood on his clothes, only on the soles of his shoes. Those shoe stains likely came from stepping in existing bloody footprints. This evidence helped clear Larry's name. Investigators also found bullet holes in the hallway furniture, suggesting Pamela had not followed Larry's advice to lock the door. Instead, she likely stepped out and confronted Patrick. Still, a key question remained: how did Patrick enter without a break-in if Pamela wouldn't have let him in? Police theorized he slipped in as she opened the door, then began shooting. To ensure Pamela would not survive, Patrick allegedly shot her and then stabbed her multiple times. A lack of usable fingerprints, however, prevented a direct link to the weapons, an obstacle for the investigation. Even so, the circumstantial evidence kept growing. Bloody footprints in Pamela's kitchen matched the tread pattern of Patrick's shoes, later recovered from his car. Pamela's mother reported that Pamela had recently lost her house keys. Investigators suspected theft rather than loss, and soon found the keys during a search of Patrick's car. Forensic examination confirmed they were Pamela's. She had planned to change the locks, but hadn't done so in time. The stolen keys indicated premeditation. Less than a week before the attack, Patrick called his ex-girlfriend to request a .22 caliber pistol to go hunting, a gun he had previously lent her for self-defense. Ammunition of the same caliber was found in his home. Ballistics linked the pistol to the crime. The recovered bullets matched ammunition from Patrick's house and came from the same batch. One mystery remained: why had Pamela stopped pressing the police to act against her stalker? She rarely told anyone about the harassment, not even her fiancé. Larry knew. A colleague reported that Pamela stopped filing complaints because she feared workplace retaliation and losing her job, a realistic concern at the time. When women's job security was weaker, Pamela likely believed she could manage the situation herself and that Patrick would eventually leave her alone. She misjudged the danger. A background check showed Patrick had a long history of violence against women, with at least 8 incidents and a prior charge of attempted murder of another woman who survived. He was found legally insane in that case, treated in a psychiatric facility, and released. His violent tendencies traced back to childhood, including animal abuse. A waitress also came forward after hearing of Pamela's death. She reported that the night before the attack, Patrick made an aggressive and is en proposition. He had made such advances before, but never so violently. On May 30, he had grabbed her arm painfully and had threatened that he would get more for that $5. Alarmed by his aggression, she refused to serve him. Detectives reconstructed the events as follows. Patrick went to Pamela's house using a set of keys she had previously lost. He entered while she was asleep. She woke to a noise, called Larry, but didn't have time to contact the police. She then went downstairs to investigate and encountered Patrick, who was armed and fired multiple shots. Whether he intended to scare her or simply missed is unclear, but 4 bullets struck her. Patrick then dragged the injured Pamela into the bedroom, placed her on the bed, and stabbed her multiple times. There were no signs of abuse, possibly because Larry's actions interrupted Patrick. Based on the timeline, Patrick was in no rush to leave. He ate a few pieces of candy, threw the candy wrappers in the car, and put Pamela's keys in the glove compartment. Patrick had parked his pickup truck in the woods behind the house, so Larry didn't notice it when he arrived. As Patrick ran, he got stuck in the mud and couldn't get out. He then called the police and fabricated an alibi to clear himself. 7 months after Pamela's death, Patrick Walsh was tried for first-degree murder. In court, the defense first argued investigative errors and violations of Patrick's rights. Those claims failed. They then attempted an insanity defense, previously used by Patrick in an attempted murder case, but that also failed. A psychiatric evaluation found him competent to stand trial. The prosecutor argued that Pamela rejected Patrick's advances, prompting him to plan a violent revenge. The forensic evidence was strong enough to convince the jury. Patrick was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Throughout the trial, he remained calm and never admitted guilt. He appealed several times, but all appeals were denied. His parole eligibility began in 2021. He petitioned for release, but the request was denied. Pamela's and Larry's relatives spoke frequently to the press, insisting they would not allow a stalker and murderer to go free. Patrick remains incarcerated. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of David Katz. The Katz family lived in Baltimore, Maryland, and were relatively well off. Richard Katz and Elizabeth were highly educated professionals. Richard worked as an engineer at NASA, designing space technology, while Elizabeth worked in pharmacology. Together, they raised 2 sons, Brandon and David, in the early years of their marriage. The family enjoyed a happy and loving environment, but as time went on, the boys grew and everything started to change. In 2006, Richard and Elizabeth decided to separate. David Katz struggled with severe mental health issues from a young age. Between the ages of 9 and 12, he visited numerous psychiatrists who prescribed him strong medications, including antidepressants and antipsychotics. His parents' disagreement over how to manage his condition was a major factor in their decision to separate. Brandon and David faced significant challenges during this difficult period in their lives. His classmates described David as shy Quiet and antisocial, David kept to himself, rarely made friends, and preferred solitude. He was also deeply passionate about video games, spending most of his free time in his room playing Madden NFL, a sports simulation game. Madden NFL, named after coach and sports commentator John Madden, is a popular series of American football video games. With a new edition released annually, David graduated from Hammond High School in 2011. He enrolled at the University of Maryland to study environmental science. However, he showed little interest in his studies or pursuing a career. Instead, he became increasingly absorbed in the virtual world. Dedicating almost all his time to gaming, David's commitment to his hobby paid off, as he developed exceptional skills in playing Madden NFL over the years. In June 2017, David Katz competed in a professional gaming tournament for the first time, using the nickname Bread. He entered the Madden Championship and won the title. Initially, as the 7 seed, David was seen as an underdog. However, he surprised everyone with his skills, defeating his opponents and earning recognition. In an interview, he confidently stated, "I don't consider myself the 7th seed. I consider myself the best player. And I like that I was able to prove that." Fellow players congratulated him on his victory and wished him success in future competitions. David was ecstatic about his win and felt on top of the world, also taking home a $10 cash prize. He continued to enter several other tournaments, but did not achieve similar success despite the loss. He remained undeterred. He built a career in the gaming world, earning an income and establishing a strong reputation in the community. Today, many gamers look up to him as an inspiration for pursuing a career in gaming. David's online popularity grew, but things were not as bright for him in real life. David was born in 1993, and his childhood was marked by challenges. Over the first 16 years of his life, 26 calls were made to the police from the Katz family home, mainly due to domestic disputes and conflicts. Despite the medications, his condition showed little improvement. 2 years later, in 2007, he was hospitalized at Shepherd Pratt Psychiatric Hospital. During his stay, doctors increased the dosage of his antidepressants. That year, David was treated at 4 different psychiatric hospitals. By this time, David's parents were divorced, and he was alternating between living at his mother's and father's homes, along with his older brother, Brandon. However, David spent most of his time with his mother. He confided in close friends that he hated living with her and wished he could live with his father. However, according to custody court documents, this was not permitted. Elizabeth twice packed David's belongings into a suitcase and forced him to leave the house. One of these incidents occurred on Mother's Day in 2007. That same year, he was enrolled in a treatment program for troubled teens. Spending several months in the wilderness, Elizabeth admitted him to the program without seeking approval from her ex-husband. 2 years later, on December 22, 2009, David wrote a letter to the judge while his parents' custody battle was still ongoing. In the letter, he expressed his feelings. "Dear Judge, today is my 16th birthday. I live with my mom, but I've wanted to live with my dad for a long time. My mom has called the police about 20 times over minor issues, like me being a little late getting home. She also drinks and yells at me, poking me with her finger and refusing to leave me alone. In the past, she used to hit me. She takes my belongings just because she feels like it and has sent me to psychiatric hospitals twice for no real reason. I can't talk to her because I see her more than anyone else, and she'll most likely just yell at me again. She lies all the time." When David became an adult, his medical visits significantly decreased, though the reason for this remains unclear. However, it is known that he continued to struggle with mental health issues. He rarely bathed, sometimes going weeks without washing, and often spent entire days playing video games, especially his favorite, Madden NFL. He would stay up until 4 a.m. and frequently paced in circles around the house. David was diagnosed with dysthymia, a chronic mood disorder characterized by low energy and a persistent, mild depressive state. Unlike major depression, dysthymia lasts much longer. People with this condition often mistake their symptoms as part of their personality, and only a qualified specialist can provide an accurate diagnosis. In addition to dysthymia, David was also diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder, a condition defined by frequent anger, irritability, and defiance toward authority figures. For David, these authority figures were his parents. Over time, David became increasingly detached from reality. He spent almost all his time online and rarely interacted with people face to face. While he was recognized as a talented Madden player, other gamers found him socially awkward and withdrawn at tournaments. He often made blunt, insulting remarks, avoided eye contact, and showed little to no emotion. David refused to engage with other players, did not seek friendships, and declined to shake hands with opponents. Regardless of whether he won or lost, David was always considered an unusual person, but no one ever felt uncomfortable around him. That all suddenly changed in the summer of 2018. Good Luck, Have Fun Game Bar, an arcade venue at the Jacksonville Landing Indoor Market, hosted a Madden NFL 19 video game tournament on August 26, 2018, with approximately 130 to 150 participants and spectators in attendance. At around 1 p.m., David was eliminated from the tournament after losing to his main competitor, Elijah Clayton. David was visibly upset after the loss and refused to shake Elijah's hand. His frustration stemmed not only from the defeat, but also from a contentious history between the two. Elijah had frequently mocked David for his social awkwardness before the tournament. David had written a guide to help players improve their Madden skills, but Elijah shared it online without permission, depriving David of the opportunity to monetize his work. They had also had a tense incident earlier at another tournament, when they both called a taxi to the airport. When the car arrived, Elijah quickly got in, closed the door in David's face, and left alone. Back to the event on August 26. After losing to his longtime rival Elijah, David left the game bar and went to a nearby pizzeria. While there, he removed his sunglasses, placed them on the edge of a table, abruptly stood up, and left at 1:30 p.m. David returned to the event. Where the tournament was still ongoing, he pulled a weapon from his backpack and dropped the backpack on the floor. None of the gamers present realized the tragedy that was about to unfold, and the entire event was being streamed live on social platforms. David aimed his weapon directly at Elijah. At that moment, the live stream camera briefly focused on Elijah, showing a red laser dot from David's weapon sight on his chest. Seconds later, as the camera switched back to the game, David attacked him. Elijah was struck by 3 bullets, one in the chest, one in the forehead, and one in the right eye. He died instantly. Still seated in his chair after killing Elijah, David began attacking others in the game bar. The attack lasted about 20 seconds before David turned the weapon on himself and ended his own life. By 1:35 p.m., the first responders, a fire brigade conducting training exercises near the game bar, arrived at the scene of the tragedy and provided aid to the victims. In total, David Katz injured 12 people. 2 of them, along with David, died, while the remaining 10 suffered non-fatal injuries. The victims who were killed were Elijah Clayton and Taylor Robertson, who was attacked in the back as he tried to flee from the game bar. Elijah Clayton, 22 years old, known in the gaming community by the nickname True Boy. From Woodland Hills, California, he was a high school graduate, played football, and had a passion for video games. Initially, Elijah had not planned to attend the Madden NFL 19 championship, but changed his mind at the last minute and decided to participate. Taylor Robertson, 27 years old, from Ballard, West Virginia, is a professional gamer known by the nickname Spot Me Pliz. Outside of gaming,
He worked as an accountant and credit analyst at a major bank and had a family. During the investigation, police discovered that David had severe mental health issues. Detectives initially believed his motive was rage over losing to a rival. However, it was later revealed that David had been planning the crime 2 weeks before the tournament. He legally purchased 2 firearms equipped with high-precision sights in his home state of Maryland. David stored the firearms in his car and brought them to the tournament. He carried a weapon on his belt, which he never used, and kept another weapon in his backpack, which he used to kill 2 gamers before taking his own life. Police were puzzled by how David was able to purchase the weapons so easily, as this appeared to be a clear violation by the firearm seller. Soon, details about David Katz's troubled life came to light. It was revealed that he had been prescribed strong antidepressants and antipsychotic medications from an early age and had been treated in psychiatric hospitals multiple times. This was likely a significant factor in the case. David was far younger than recommended when he started using these drugs. Sadly, before the tragedy happened, no one could have predicted that this quiet, introverted young man could act so coldly. Perhaps the tragedy could have been prevented if the game bar had security measures like metal detectors in place. This might have stopped David from bringing weapons to the tournament so easily following the Jacksonville attack. Numerous lawsuits were filed against the organizers of the Madden NFL 19 event, the game bar owner, the pizzeria, and the seller who sold David Katz 2 weapons. All parties were held accountable. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Manijeh Starren. Manijeh Starren was born on May 23, 1989. Little is known about her childhood, except that she had an older brother by the age of 34. She was living in a small apartment and struggling financially. She also dealt with mental health issues. Manijeh worked hard to overcome these challenges to create a safe and comfortable environment for her children. But it was a difficult journey. Her relatives had to help care for her children. Her life continued without major changes until something unexpected happened. On May 1, 2023, the St. Paul police received a disturbing call from Manijeh's father. He had last spoken to her on April 23, and she seemed very scared. He believed that she was afraid of her boyfriend. The police began searching for her, but did not find her in her apartment. A man who claimed to be the father of one of Manijeh's children also reported that he had not heard from her for a long time. It was unusual for her to go silent for so long, as she was in regular contact with him because they had a child together, according to him. Their last conversation had been on April 21, 2023. The police also spoke with a neighbor of Manijeh's who had disturbing information. One day, she noticed a bruise under Manijeh's eye and a red mark on her neck. When the neighbor asked if she had been attacked, Manijeh confirmed that she had. The neighbor suggested calling the police, but Manijeh begged her not to, fearing it would make things worse. This allegation of assault further complicated the investigation and added to the complexity of Manijeh's situation. A number of important pieces of information were uncovered, revealing that Manijeh had a boyfriend named Joseph Stephen Jorgensen, who frequently visited her apartment, although his last name was not listed on the lease. The manager provided the police with his phone number. It was confirmed that the phone number belonged to Joseph, a man in his 40s. The manager identified him in a photo, confirming that he was the one who had visited Manijeh. This discovery was a major development in the case. The police obtained recordings from surveillance cameras located near the apartment, which provided crucial evidence. At 6 p.m. on April 23, the cameras recorded Manijeh, clearly upset. Hurriedly leaving her apartment, she was quickly tackled by Joseph, who pulled her inside. This is the last recorded footage. Video analysis showed Joseph frequently entering and exiting the apartment between April 21 and April 28. The manager raised concerns when he mentioned that there was only one set of keys for residents, despite the footage clearly showing Joseph using his own key to open the door each time. At approximately 5 p.m. on April 28, Joseph was caught on camera leaving the apartment with a suitcase and a duffel bag. He loaded the luggage into a pickup truck and drove away quickly. Police later discovered that the truck belonged to a resident of the apartment building. Police also spoke with a friend of Manijay, who had valuable information about her lifestyle and her relationship with Joseph. The friend explained that although Manijay struggled with drug addiction, she always kept in touch with her family and never went more than a day without contacting them. Therefore, her absence for several days raised alarms. The friend also recounted a phone conversation with Joseph after Manijay went missing. Joseph claimed that Manijay went to the store but did not return, according to the family friend. Joseph expressed concern that a man named Kyle might pose a threat to Manijay. After Manijay went missing, Joseph took no action. He did not report her absence to the police and continued with his daily life. He was the last person to be in the apartment before she went missing. Concerned and with mounting evidence, police entered Manijay's apartment with the building manager and quickly discovered alarming signs. The bedroom window was broken. In the living room, they found a television with a severely cracked screen, which the manager confirmed had never been damaged before. As they continued their search, police found broken glass on the microwave, with shards scattered throughout the bedroom. The mattress had a large hole in it, and there were red marks on the bed, which raised suspicions. The anxiety surrounding Manijay's disappearance grew, revealing a troubling array of evidence. On May 25, after completing the necessary legal procedures, officers obtained a search warrant and processed Manijay's apartment for vital evidence. Experts discovered a disturbing scene. There was a large amount of blood in the living room and kitchen, especially on the sofa and floor. Police confirmed that efforts had been made to clean up the scene. It was clear that someone had been seriously injured or possibly dead in the apartment. Preliminary analysis confirmed that blood samples taken from the scene belonged to Manijay. As officers continued their investigation, they uncovered important information about her finances. They discovered that she had received government assistance in Minnesota through electronic benefit transfers, which allow recipients to make purchases directly at retail stores. Police quickly realized the significance of this discovery and obtained a warrant to access Manijay's account records. They found a series of transactions made after her disappearance. One notable transaction occurred on May 9, 2023, when Joseph used Manijay's card to withdraw cash from a highway ATM. That same day, he made a purchase at a store, buying items such as a cleaning bucket, 2 boxes of paper towels, trash bags, liquid detergent, gloves, and disinfectant wipes. The strange combination of items aroused the police's suspicions. On May 11, Joseph used Manijay's card again, this time at a grocery store. He also went to a hardware store, where he purchased more paper towels, cleaning supplies, and disinfectant wipes. The repeated purchases of these items further raised concerns about Joseph's actions and intentions. Police obtained a warrant to access information associated with Joseph's Google account. After reviewing the data, they discovered a series of significant internet searches made by him. On May 1, he searched for how to report a missing person. On May 3, Joseph searched for methods to delete files. On May 23, he inquired about removing Jeeps from a scooter. Finally, on June 4, he read about lime for soil. It is important to note that lime is a substance that can accelerate the decomposition of a body and eliminate the associated odor. The investigation team was aware of this, raising their concerns about Joseph's potential involvement in Manijay's disappearance. With compelling evidence against him, they obtained a search warrant for his home. On June 26, a special weapons and tactics team arrived at Joseph's home, prepared for a potentially dangerous situation. When police confronted him in the apartment, he resisted and barricaded himself in his bedroom, shocking everyone present. He lit a fire to escalate the situation. The special weapons and tactics team proceeded with extreme caution, but were unable to apprehend him. He resisted aggressively and even attempted to grab one of the officers' weapons. Joseph was eventually restrained and taken to a local hospital for evaluation to rule out any mental health issues that might have influenced his behavior at the time of his arrest. There were 2 other people in the apartment, including an unidentified woman. She was injured, with bruises, scratches, and a red mark on her neck. The woman later reported to the police that Joseph had choked her and threatened her with violence. Claiming that the neighbors would not hear her screams, the second person living in the apartment was Joseph's roommate. When the task force arrived, he hid in his bedroom, where he was discovered and arrested. He later informed the St. Paul Police Department that he had suffered a traumatic brain injury, which had resulted in a loss of smell. He also mentioned his long-standing relationship with Joseph and explained that, due to his busy Monday through Friday work schedule, he rarely interacted with Joseph or the women Joseph brought to the apartment. The roommate also noted that he had only met Manije once or twice and emphasized that he did not have a close relationship with her. When the roommate asked Joseph about Manije's whereabouts, Joseph told him that she had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital. The man also admitted that he had used Manije's money. Joseph had given him her card and PIN, leading him to believe that he had access to the account. Police interviewed the manager of the residential complex where Joseph lived. He reported that on May 15 or 16, 2023, residents complained about a foul odor coming from Joseph's apartment. The manager noted that it resembled the stench of a dead animal to determine the source of the odor. On May 18, the manager and a maintenance worker attempted to enter Joseph's apartment to investigate. However, Joseph acted aggressively and blocked their path. The manager then instructed Joseph and his roommate to clean the apartment and gave them a week to do so. Shortly thereafter, both the manager and maintenance staff saw Joseph carrying large black duffel bags out of the apartment. The sight shocked witnesses, who began to speculate about what might be in the bags. The forensic team from the St. Paul Police Department conducted an investigation of Joseph's apartment. During the search, they discovered more evidence. Their report noted a significant amount of blood in the bathroom and in his closet. There was a foul odor in his home that matched the odors reported by residents. They also discovered other biological material found in the home. After arresting Joseph, the police accessed Jeep's data from his phone, which pointed to a storage facility where Joseph rented a room with a refrigerator through his roommate. Realizing the importance of this clue, they obtained a search warrant for the storage facility. On June 28, the police began investigating the location. As they approached the storage facility, they immediately smelled a very unpleasant odor. The police decided to cut the lock to gain access. Once inside, they discovered containers wrapped in plastic, a blue gym bag, and a small suitcase. Notably, one of these bags was similar to the one Joseph was seen carrying out of Manije's apartment in the surveillance footage. They also found a green bag containing cleaning products similar to those Joseph had previously purchased, sitting on top of the refrigerator. On the advice of forensic experts, the police carefully removed the containers and sports bags from the refrigerator, from which the foul odor was emanating. The contents were inaccessible until they were sent to the medical examiner for further analysis. After X-rays were taken, it was discovered that all of the containers contained human remains. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner then conducted an autopsy and determined that all of the body parts were carefully packaged, wrapped in multiple layers of paper, film, and bags. Opening these packed remains was a laborious process. Tests confirmed that the remains belonged to Manije Starin. With identification made through her tattoos and dental records, the police again reviewed surveillance footage from Manije's home. Focusing on the bags Joseph carried, he had handling of the body Manije's in her apartment. Sorting her remains into different bags and carrying them out, Joseph faces multiple charges, including second-degree murder and arson for setting fire to his apartment during a confrontation with the Special Weapons and Tactics team. He is also charged with threatening and disarming a police officer. On June 30, 2023, Joseph Stephen Jorgensen had an afternoon court hearing regarding the murder charge. Throughout the trial, Joseph shook his head while listening to the assistant district attorney announced that his bail was set at $5 million. The judge remained largely silent throughout the proceedings. Joseph's attorney requested a bail hearing for later. It is believed that a detailed defense strategy is currently being developed. On the same day, Joseph appeared in court. St. Paul Police Sergeant Ernsta held a press conference to discuss a significant event that occurred during the ongoing investigation. Fanta Zayavong was also reported missing. She was last seen in July 2021 with Joseph. This new information prompted the police to immediately begin searching for her. During the press conference, it was announced that Fanta Zayavong's remains had been discovered in a separate storage facility in North Minneapolis, approximately 30 miles from where Manija's body was found. Details about the second victim have not been released, but many believe that Joseph was directly involved in her murder. Manija's family has expressed gratitude to the police for any leads in the ongoing investigation. If Joseph is convicted of second-degree murder, he could face a maximum sentence of 40 years in prison. His next court appearance, originally scheduled for August 21, has been postponed for unknown reasons. Joseph Stephen Jorgensen remains in custody at the Ramsey County Jail. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case, the case of Saga Elneborg. Saga Elneborg was a 20-year-old girl who was 7 months pregnant at the time. She was in a relationship with her boyfriend, Mohammedaman Dirisek Ibrahim, the father of her child. They had been together for about 2 years and were expecting a baby boy. With doctors confirming that the pregnancy was progressing well, Saga was eagerly looking forward to becoming a mother in just a few weeks and had carefully prepared for the birth of her child. During this time, she shared pictures of her growing belly and many items she had bought for her future child on social media. She was especially fond of posting pictures of children's clothes. On April 28, 2023, Saga had scheduled a meeting with her boyfriend, Mohammed Amin, to discuss their relationship. That day, she informed her mother that Mohammed Amin was planning to visit her home, so Melissa decided not to interrupt their conversation. Saga's family was very cautious about her relationship with someone from a different culture, especially since they knew that challenges could arise when meeting Mohammed Amin's family from Somalia. At that time, Mohammed Amin was standing outside Saga's apartment door when he entered the house. Saga began to share some of the problems they were having in their relationship. Saga still loved Mohammed Amin and wanted their relationship to succeed. However, she felt uncomfortable when he often hid her from his parents, which caused conflicts between them. On April 29, 2023, at around 1 p.m., Saga's mother, Melissa, came to her daughter's apartment to support her and help gather her belongings in preparation for the arrival of her grandson. When Melissa arrived at the apartment, she was talking on the phone with her other daughter. She rang the doorbell several times, but no one answered, which surprised her. She knocked on the door, used the intercom, and even called Saga's phone and sent a text message. What puzzled she was that there was still no response from Saga. She thought that her daughter might have forgotten about her visit and gone out to run an errand. Although Melissa had a spare key, she noticed that the door was unlocked as she approached, which seemed very suspicious. Saga was always careful to lock the door. Even when she stepped out for a moment to get the mail or do the laundry, there was no way she would leave the door open. When she entered the apartment, Melissa heard the sound of running water in the kitchen, so she rushed in to turn it off. She called out to her daughter, but there was no answer. When Melissa entered her daughter's bedroom, she found the lights off, and the darkness made her feel uneasy. When Melissa turned on the light, she was horrified to see her daughter lying on the floor. Saga was there, with a light cord wrapped around her neck. The scene was even more terrifying because a heavy table had fallen over. Melissa rushed to her daughter's side, pushed the table aside, and carefully removed the cord from her neck. She then called emergency services while attempting to give her daughter first aid. The first thing she noticed was that Saga's body was stiff and very cold, indicating that she had been dead for a considerable amount of time. Paramedics arrived quickly, but unfortunately, both Saga and her unborn child were dead. The police who arrived began an investigation and noted that she had suffered head and facial injuries. The crime scene was covered in dried blood, and jewelry boxes were found upside down on the floor. There were no signs of forced entry, but the police initially considered that she had taken her own life. However, after reviewing data from Saga's cell phone, they concluded that she could not have ended her life by herself. Saga had no mental health problems. She was cheerful and lively. Especially during her pregnancy, she was eagerly awaiting the birth of her child and could never have harmed herself or her baby. Forensic experts collected a significant amount of evidence at the crime scene, including fingerprints, blood, and DNA from under Saga's fingernails and from her belongings for analysis. The forensic expert concluded that Saga died of strangulation, with an estimated time of death between 1 and 3 in the morning. On the forensic expert's desk were not only Saga's body, but also the body of her newborn baby. Weighing 1.7 kg, tests showed that the baby was completely healthy. This was a devastating shock to Saga's mother, family, and friends. The police quickly launched an investigation into the messages from Saga's relatives. The first person they spoke to was her mother, Melissa. She explained that on April 28, her daughter had planned to meet some friends at a local restaurant. Melissa noticed that her daughter seemed very anxious and was checking her phone frequently. Saga said that she did not want to miss a message from her boyfriend, Mohammed Amin. Melissa revealed that he had already informed his parents about Saga. However, before that, Mohammed Amin had been extremely anxious and nearly had a nervous breakdown because he feared that his parents would not approve of his relationship with Saga. His parents are Muslims with strict conservative beliefs. In contrast, Saga is a Swedish citizen with Thai and European heritage, and she holds more modern views. Mohammed Amin and his family are refugees. His parents brought him to Europe when he was a child. Although he grew up in Europe and embraced modernity, he still valued his family's traditions. Another important issue was the difference in religion. Mohammed Amin's family was Muslim, while Saga's relatives were Christian. This difference in beliefs and traditions often led to conflict, straining their relationship. After dining at the restaurant, Saga said goodbye to her mother and friends, who wished her well, not knowing that it would be the last time they would see her alive. Tragically, after returning home, Saga was murdered. Police suspect that Mohammed Amin may have informed his family about his relationship with Saga, which may have provoked their violent reaction and ultimately led to the tragedy. During the initial stages of the investigation, the police looked into whether Mohammed Amin's relatives were involved in the murder. His mother had raised suspicions when she left home late at night. However, it was later confirmed that she had only gone to the shop and returned after about 15 minutes. There was no evidence that his relatives were involved in the case. The police also discovered that one day, Mohammed Amin's mother found the car he was using parked near Saga's house. At that time, his mother suspected he was having a romantic relationship with a Christian woman. After discovering this, Mohammed Amin's mother was furious. She informed him that he was no longer welcome in their home. She felt that if he did not respect their traditions, it would be easier to cut ties with him. In his defense, Mohammed Amin claimed that he had never visited those people and that he had convinced her of that. However, according to Melissa, their relationship had deteriorated since Saga became pregnant. It was rumored that Mohammed Amin wanted her to have an abortion because he was afraid of his family's reaction. Despite this pressure, Saga decided to continue with the pregnancy and give birth. She said that, if necessary, she could raise the child herself. In October, Saga shared the news of her pregnancy with her family, and everyone was very happy at that time. Her relationship with her boyfriend was not good, as they often had conflicts due to cultural differences, which made communication difficult. Saga felt that if Mohammed Amin did not change his views, it would be difficult for them to connect. However, a few months later, things seemed to improve. He began to adapt to her lifestyle and accepted the pregnancy. Appearing happy to be a father, Saga then moved into a larger apartment with a nursery, which she began to decorate. By March 2023, they were still together, but there were some troubling signs in their relationship. A friend confided in Saga that Mohammed Amin had tried to convince her that she needed to kick Saga in the stomach multiple times to induce a miscarriage. Saga was furious when she learned about this, but Mohammed Amin insisted that it was all a fabrication. Melissa knew about these disturbing events, but did not want to accept them as true. However, now that her daughter was dead, it was clear that Mohammed Amin's intention to harm Saga was real. The police began to piece together a timeline of events and soon discovered that Mohammed Amin and Saga had planned to spend that evening together. However, he seemed to be avoiding Saga, intentionally staying late at work to avoid seeing her that evening. Saga spoke to him. She told Mohammed Amin that he needed to tell his family about their relationship, the move, and her pregnancy, or they would break up. On April 28, Saga was waiting to hear from him, according to Melissa. Her daughter seemed quite anxious during this time. The police reviewed cell phone records and confirmed that Saga had been in contact with Mohammed Amin until 11 p.m. on April 28. He had said that he would not inform his parents about Saga and their relationship, stating that his family was more important than having an illegitimate child. Saga felt disappointed with his decision and tried to convince him to reconsider. She argued that if they broke up, his family would eventually find out about the child because she had planned to seek financial support from him after discussing their situation. Mohammed Amin agreed to tell his family about Saga and the baby. He expressed his anxiety, saying that he felt like his heart was going to burst. This was the last message he sent her before she was killed. Police believe that Saga's determination to reveal the truth and her ability to tell his parents herself motivated Mohammed Amin to attack the girl. He remains the only suspect in the case. Mohammed Amin was brought in for questioning. He claimed he had nothing to do with the incident and stated that on the night of the murder, he had returned home to confess to his parents about his relationship with Saga. However, geolocation data showed that this was not true. Mohammed Amin had, in fact, gone to his girlfriend's apartment when told that he was the prime suspect in Saga's murder. Mohammed Amin became defensive. He insisted he was innocent and had an alibi, claiming that he was driving with a friend at the time of Saga's murder. However, the friend was on the phone with someone else and refused to testify, despite his alibi failing. Mohammed Amin maintained that he last saw Saga on the evening of April 27. Mohammed Amin stated that he had confessed their relationship to his parents. However, the police discovered that he had never spent a full night at her new apartment, as he was afraid his family would find out. Due to Mohammed Amin's suspicious behavior, the police decided to arrest him and keep him in custody while they continued their investigation. He was detained for several months. Eventually, the prosecution gathered strong evidence against him, claiming it was sufficient to ensure victory in court. The investigation even involved specially trained dogs, which helped identify some of the evidence. Mohammed Amin's lawyer argued that the dogs' findings should not be the main basis of the case, as they were not a reliable source of information. However, there was still much more evidence against him. DNA analysis and a review of the evidence took quite a while, but eventually confirmed the truth of the case. Mohammed Amin wrapped an electric cord around Saga's neck while she was sleeping on the sofa. He then dragged Saga to the floor and attempted to push her onto her stomach in an effort to force her to terminate the pregnancy, despite her best efforts to protect her child. Saga sustained injuries to her hip. Mohammed Amin then attempted to strangle Saga, pressing the edge of the table against her throat. Exhausted and unable to lift the heavy object, Saga suffocated. When she died, the table was still pressed against her throat, leaving a deep dent after committing the crime. Mohammed Amin tried to make it look like a robbery by throwing some boxes around. The defense argued that Saga was the victim of real robbers who stole money and various household items. However, the prosecutor believed that Mohammed Amin's actions only added to his guilt. Several missing items were later discovered during a search of his home. He claimed that these items were either his or gifts from his girlfriend. A key piece of evidence against him was his DNA found under Saga's fingernails. In addition, a forensic expert determined that Saga had been abused before her death. Mohammed Amin claimed that the act was consensual and had occurred a few days before her death. However, the prosecution cast doubt on his testimony, highlighting inconsistencies and lies in his statements during interrogation. Police found multiple traces of his DNA in Saga's apartment. The investigation revealed some disturbing searches by Mohammed Amin. Notably, he searched whether kicking a mother in the stomach could harm her unborn child. The prosecutor's office believes that instead of visiting his family, Mohammed Amin went to Saga's apartment. He never intended to tell his family about her for fear of their reaction, but Saga pressured him with her demands. In response, he killed her. Motivated by fear of his parents, the defense argued that the DNA found under Saga's fingernails could have been there long before the murder. However, Melissa, Saga's mother, insisted that her daughter was very clean and had showered shortly before her death. She knew this, especially during Saga's pregnancy. As her daughter was meticulous about her personal hygiene, it is clear that Saga had showered and changed into clean clothes, meaning that the DNA evidence found on her body and belongings was still fresh and must have been left behind during the attack. Curiously, after Saga's death, Mohammed Amin quickly deleted her from Snapchat and removed his social media accounts. The police found that he was trying to hide his connection to the crime. Fortunately, the deleted data was easily recovered and added to the evidence against him. Although there was no direct evidence, Mohammed Amin's behavior clearly showed that he was indifferent to his girlfriend, Saga. During the investigation, it was noted that he was a short distance from her apartment while continuing to communicate with her from afar. He neither approached nor left, as if he were waiting for something. It is possible that during this time, he was trying to muster the courage to attack or wanted to ensure that Saga was asleep. At 2 a.m., Mohammed Amin's cell phone signal went off. He then turned on his phone to try to contact his friend, but his call was ignored. An active call signal from him was detected in the same residential area where Saga lived. This evidence helped the police uncover another lie by Mohammed Amin. He claimed that during this time, he was at home with his parents. However, Mohammed Amin's cell phone only became active at 2:16 a.m., which matched the forensic expert's conclusion about the time of death of Saga and her child. Mohammed Amin's story kept changing. At one point, he fabricated a story about a gang of robbers. He claimed to have hidden a bag of money in Saga's home, but he never explained where he obtained the large sum. According to Mohammed Amin, the robbers broke into Saga's home to steal the cash. Saga tried to stop the robbers, which ultimately led to her murder. The prosecutor's office rejected this idea. As there were no signs of forced entry at the crime scene, it was clear that Saga had either let the killer into her home willingly or that he had a key to her apartment. Mohammed Amin had a motive for the crime. During his 9 months in prison, he never confessed and steadfastly denied any involvement. However, the prosecutor's office gathered a significant amount of evidence, both direct and indirect. To support their case, although he did not admit to the crime, he expressed fear about telling his family about Saga. He claimed to love her and even the child, but he believed his conservative parents would disown him for dating a European girl. After hearing arguments from both the prosecution and the defense, the jury deliberated on the verdict on June 9, 2024. They unanimously found Mohammed Amin Abdirisek Ibrahim guilty of the premeditated murder of Saga Elneborg, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Despite this, he maintained that he loved both Saga and his unborn child. Claiming that he never intended to harm them, he insisted that violence was not part of his character and that this was the first crime he had ever committed. The investigation revealed that Mohammed Amin had been seeing other women regularly during the 2 years of his relationship with Saga, although he denied any extramarital affairs. Evidence showed that he had numerous meetings with different girls, some of which became intimate. This information further tarnished his reputation. His defense attorney, meanwhile, argued that Mohammed Amin was innocent and that Saga had been the victim of an attempted robbery. The attorney promised to fight for his freedom and intended to appeal the jury's decision. An appeal was filed shortly after the decision was announced, but the final outcome remains unclear. Although Mohammed Amin was charged with Saga's murder, he was never charged in connection with the death of his unborn child, which angered Saga's family. The investigation attracted considerable public and media attention. The tragedy once again highlighted issues surrounding migrants, especially those from Muslim countries, who have been arriving in Sweden more frequently in recent years. Many people have noted that these migrants struggle to integrate into European society and often refuse to accept individuals from different cultures. A violent murder arising from cultural and religious differences sparked public outrage and prompted calls for government action. Some defended Mohammed Amin, claiming he was innocent. His family argued that he had no violent tendencies, and many believed in his innocence, offering him strong support. According to relatives, Mohammed Amin was not ready to be a father, but he maintained that he loved his girlfriend and son, even after their tragic deaths. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Richard McCroskey. In September 2009, 4 people were attacked in their home. The bodies were there for days before the police arrived. The victims were Emma Niederbrock, 16, her friend Melanie Wells, 18, and Emma's parents, Mark Niederbrock, 50, and Deborah Kelly, 53. In today's video, we explore the complex chain of events that led to the deaths of these 4 individuals. Mark's family lived in Farmville, Virginia. He graduated from State College and worked as a graphic designer. Mark found his faith and chose to become a pastor, serving at the Hicksburg Church and earning respect in the community. His wife, Deborah, earned her doctorate and became an associate professor of sociology and criminology at Longwood University in Farmville on October 15, 1992. Mark and Deborah welcomed their daughter, Emma Niederbrock. Although she was initially a well-adjusted child, she eventually faced common emotional challenges during adolescence. When Emma was around 15, her parents decided to homeschool her, which led to intense feelings of isolation and frustration. This struggle pushed her into a long-lasting rebellious phase in early 2009, when her parents divorced. Emma's life became even more chaotic. Although they maintained a good relationship, the divorce took a toll on her. During this time, she discovered horrorcore music, which resonated with her through its lyrics for many fans. These lyrics expressed repressed anger and frustration,
feeling isolated in her small town of Farmville. Emma found solace in online horror forums, where she met Melanie, an older girl from Virginia, who understood her struggles. Both girls had fathers who were Presbyterian ministers and bonded over their shared frustration with living in such a restrictive environment. Emma met a horror artist on the forums named Richard Samuel McCroskey. Born December 26, 1988, he lived with his sister and parents in Castro Valley, California. Those who knew Richard described him as quiet and somewhat submissive. He was bullied at school for his weight and red hair, which made him feel like an outsider. Richard enjoyed this isolation and developed unique interests that set him apart from his peers, notably. He had a strong dislike for music as a child. However, while at the dentist, his father played a CD by Insane Clown Posse, and Richard was instantly drawn to the band. He then borrowed his father's CD to make a copy, which sparked his passion for music. Richard became interested in horror music around the time he was struggling in school. He faced bullying and had trouble fitting into the traditional education system, which caused him to drop out of 2 high schools. It is important to note that Richard was very intelligent. He had a talent for graphic design and even dreamed of starting his own company. However, his passion for horror music eventually took a different direction. Soon after, Richard bought a cheap microphone and began recording his own music under the name Seco Sam. His lyrics described violent fantasies and the desire to harm others. He uploaded some of his songs to his MySpace page and became heavily involved in the horror music community. Other horror music artists accepted him, and despite the dark nature of his work, he still showed real talent in songwriting. After starting his YouTube channel in 2006, Richard uploaded a variety of content, including concert recordings and disturbing videos. In 2008, when he was 19, he began a relationship with 15-year-old Emma. They quickly bonded and began talking on the phone every day. Richard believed that Emma loved him and genuinely wanted to be with him. Despite the distance between them, they exchanged videos to learn more about each other, while his relationship with Emma blossomed. Richard faced some serious problems at home. His father kicked his mother out of the house in April 2009, which may have strengthened his relationship with Emma, whose parents had also split up just a few months earlier. Emma, Richard, and Melanie made plans to meet in September for a horror music festival called Strictly for the Wicked. Richard began going to Farmville, while Melanie flew in and stayed with Emma and Deborah. Deborah was initially nervous about letting an older guy stay with her daughter. However, seeing Emma happy for the first time since her divorce, she changed her mind. She agreed to let Richard stay, but insisted that she and Mark accompany the trio to the Horrorcore Music Festival. Emma posted on Richard's MySpace, expressing her love for him and her excitement at finally meeting him. Unfortunately, things did not go as Emma had expected. Richard acted immaturely, which disappointed Emma. However, since they had planned to attend the festival, she decided to be polite and go along. It was also a chance to see her favorite horrorcore bands. Even though Richard had disappointed her, she knew that she could still enjoy the festival with Melanie. Richard was probably excited to spend time with Emma, whom he considered his girlfriend. However, Emma had other intentions. Those close to her noted that she never referred to Richard as her boyfriend. They were just getting to know each other. Richard may have misinterpreted their relationship. Witnesses reported that Richard was upset when he saw Emma flirting with other guys. She deliberately avoided him, which may have further upset Richard. Tensions rose when Emma exchanged phone numbers with another guy. Richard then invaded her privacy by checking her messages and discovered that the guy had asked Emma to be his girlfriend. Although Richard
was emotionally disturbed. No one around him noticed anything unusual. The group then returned to Farmville at approximately 2:43 a.m. Melanie posted on MySpace about the fun she had at the show, how much she missed her family, and that she would be returning home on the 16th while she was posting. Richard was drinking, using illegal substances, and taking strong painkillers at approximately 3 a.m. on September 14. Richard took a hammer from Emma's backyard and went upstairs. He entered Melanie's room and struck her on the head. Killing her instantly, he then entered Emma's mother, Deborah's room, and killed her as well. After that, he entered Emma's room. While it is unclear what happened next, it is possible that Richard watched her sleep and imagined the life he thought they could have together. He eventually attacked Emma, delivering fatal blows to her face after the murders. Richard was at a loss for what to do next in his chaotic mental state. He chose to record videos of himself in these recordings. He talked about the terrible acts he had committed, acknowledging that people would despise him for it. But he felt he had no choice because he had lost control in the videos. He expressed remorse for his actions and conveyed love for his family. On a darker note, Richard spent 3 days in the house with the people he had hurt. He did not shower, and it was unclear if he even ate or slept by September 16th. However, he could no longer hide from reality. Melanie's mother had been trying to contact her for days, knowing that Melanie would return on the 16th. She became worried when there was still no news and asked her husband to go to Farmville to check on her. He waited 8 hours outside Deborah's house. He kept knocking and calling, but no one answered. So he went home. The next day, Melanie's mother called Deborah's house phone. Richard answered and informed Melanie's mother that the girls were visiting Emma's father, which prompted her to contact Mark. Mark said that Emma and Melanie were not with him and that he had not heard from them for several days, realizing that something was wrong. Mark went to his ex-wife Deborah's house, where Richard was staying, around 5 p.m. when Mark entered the house. Richard immediately attacked him after killing Mark. Richard dragged his and Melanie's bodies into Emma's room. Melanie's mother became increasingly concerned when Mark stopped answering her phone calls. She called Richard again, and this time he insisted that he did not know where the girls were. He mentioned hearing strange noises coming from the basement. Melanie's mother instructed him to call 911, which he did. When Richard called 911, he stated that he had heard a noise in the basement and was too scared to investigate. He asked the police to come and help him check what the noise in the basement was. He also informed them that the house was not his. He was at his girlfriend's house when the police arrived to assist him. They noticed a foul odor, however. The police did not find any reason to investigate further. They felt satisfied with the explanation Richard provided and left the crime scene. Strangely, the police did not notice the dried blood on Richard. When the police left, he escaped. He found Mark's car keys and drove away. Meanwhile, Melanie's mother repeatedly called the police, urging them to take action regarding her missing daughter, forcing the police to return to the crime scene once more. By this time, Richard was gone. The front door was unlocked, and when the police entered, they smelled a foul odor. They searched the house and discovered 4 bodies, prompting them to launch an investigation into the events that had occurred while trying to get to the airport. Richard, an inexperienced driver, caused a car accident. He was arrested by the police that night, however, because he had not yet been identified as a murder suspect. He was only charged with driving without a license, a misdemeanor. This allowed him to leave as long as he promised to attend court. A tow truck driver came to tow the car and asked Richard if he wanted a ride, which he accepted, requesting to be dropped off at a nearby gas station during the trip. The tow truck driver noticed a strong, foul odor coming from Richard, describing it as the worst odor he had ever encountered. Upon arriving at the gas station, Richard was captured on surveillance footage, purchasing several items. He then went to the airport to purchase a ticket home. Unfortunately for him, he did not have enough money for his next flight, so he had to wait until the next morning with nowhere else to go. He fell asleep in the waiting area. Eventually, the police identified Richard as a suspect and issued an arrest warrant for him by any means necessary. Airport security captured video footage of him, and a security guard alerted the police to his location. Resulting in Richard's arrest, the police initially tried to link him to 2 other murders in the area and charged him with 6 counts of premeditated murder. 2 of those charges were later dropped. But Richard Samuel McCroskey still faced the death penalty on the remaining 4. He eventually pleaded guilty in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence from the judge and was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Richard is currently incarcerated at Wallens Ridge State Prison in Big Stone Gap, Virginia. There are reports that other inmates dislike Richard and often bully him. Although these claims have not been verified, Melanie's parents may find comfort in knowing that he is no longer capable of harming anyone. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Joanne Witt. Joanne Witt is a single mother and engineer who raised her daughter, Tyler, on her own during a challenging teenage period filled with rebellion. Despite the hardships, Joanne loved Tyler deeply and tried her best to give her a better life. However, Tyler's rebellion came to a head when she was 14, leading to a devastating tragedy. Joanne suffered from lupus, an autoimmune disease, which made it difficult for her to form healthy relationships with men. Despite this, she had a strong desire to become a mother. She chose to undergo artificial insemination, despite her family's objections due to concerns about genetics. Nevertheless, Joanne went ahead with the procedure. Although her pregnancy was difficult, she eventually gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Tyler. Tyler's struggles began in childhood. She was often naughty, short-tempered, and refused to go to kindergarten, forcing Joanne, who had a lot of work to do, to deal with the situation. One day, when Tyler was 5, she threw another tantrum, screaming and refusing to go to kindergarten. Frustrated, Joanne lost her temper and hit Tyler. A staff member at the kindergarten witnessed the incident and reported it as abuse, prompting an investigation by Child Protective Services. During the investigation, Joanne admitted to hitting Tyler in a fit of anger and expressed remorse for her actions. As a result, Tyler was temporarily placed in the care of Joanne's parents. This situation was extremely difficult for Joanne, who felt alone. She loved her daughter deeply and wanted to reunite with her, so she decided to take parenting classes. Joanne's determination eventually paid off, and after 6 months, she regained custody of Tyler. Their relationship began to improve, and Tyler started to understand and respect her mother. Friends and family noticed their growing closeness. Despite these improvements, Tyler still had occasional tantrums. Joanne did her best to provide a comfortable and prosperous life for her daughter, Tyler. They lived in a 5-bedroom house with a pool in El Dorado Hills, an affluent suburb of California. Tyler had many experiences, including frequent trips to Mexico and Jamaica. However, this period of prosperity did not last long. As Tyler entered her teens, she became increasingly aggressive, leading to serious conflicts between her and Joanne. Although there is no evidence that Joanne was cruel, people close to the family knew that Tyler often insulted her mother. She accused Joanne of being an alcoholic and believed her mother was useless because of her drinking. In fact, there is no evidence that Joanne was an alcoholic. No one ever saw her drunk. She suffered from lupus, which made her face flush and caused her pain when she took medication. A glass of wine on the weekend helped her cope with these difficulties. Unfortunately, it was during these times that Tyler said the harshest things about her mother. When Tyler was 12, she began running away from home, and her academic performance dropped significantly one day. After starting a fight, Tyler hit her mother several times. Tyler then called the police and tried to accuse her mother of abuse and alcoholism. However, Tyler had no visible injuries, while Joanne had multiple injuries to her face, which made Tyler's testimony seem unreliable. The police found no evidence of Tyler's abuse or Joanne's alcoholism, leading them to close the case in late 2008. Tyler then met an older boy named Stephen Paul Culver, and they quickly connected. Like Tyler, Stephen lived in El Dorado Hills. He was generally a nice guy, and Tyler responded positively to him. Stephen was a college student who aspired to be a math teacher and worked part-time at a coffee shop. He was not considered cruel or dangerous. Instead, he was seen as a bit eccentric. Tyler met Stephen at the coffee shop where he worked, and they became friends. After a few months, their friendship developed into a romantic relationship. Tyler often complained to Stephen about her mother, whom she described as an alcoholic and accused of abusing her for years. At the time, Stephen was living with his father, but Tyler wanted to be closer to Stephen. Tyler convinced her mother to give Stephen a room in their house. At that time, Joanne had met Stephen several times and thought he was a nice guy. However, she was concerned about their age difference, as he was 5 years older than Tyler, and she was uncomfortable with having a man living in their house. Tyler's family and relatives were strongly against the idea, but Tyler assured her mother that Stephen was not a threat and that they were like siblings. Joanne did not know that this was a lie. Eventually, Joanne agreed to let Stephen move in. Pretending he was renting a room, he began paying Joanne $500 a month, a small amount that helped supplement the family budget. During the day, he studied and worked, and in the evenings, he helped with housework, tutored Tyler in math, and had dinner with them. Although the arrangement seemed strange, Joanne realized that it was beneficial for her daughter, and she appreciated the extra help around the house. Stephen officially moved into their home in 2009, by which time he had formed a close relationship with Tyler. Joanne did not know about their relationship in front of her. The two teenagers acted like siblings, successfully hiding their romance. Despite Joanne's suspicions, Tyler was able to convince her mother that they were just friends. During this time, Tyler's diary contained interesting entries about her boyfriend, expressing that they were always together, had no problems, and could be intimate whenever they wanted. She declared her love for him, asserting that nothing could come between them. Despite constant arguments with her mother, these never escalated into violence. Tyler's academic performance remained poor. She frequently broke curfew, smoked, and wrote more in her diary. Joanne, sensing potential danger, wrote in her diary that she feared for her daughter's safety. Her concerns were well-founded, as Tyler had a history of self-harm during this time. Stephen acted responsibly, noticing that Tyler was having trouble in school. He tried to persuade her not to skip classes and offered to help her with her studies, especially in math. However, despite his support, her relationship with Stephen had a negative impact on her. Tyler became obsessed with him and lost interest in her studies. On May 13, 2009, 47-year-old Joanne returned home and went into the utility room. There, she discovered lubricant, some toys, and a small amount of marijuana. Since Stephen kept his belongings in that room, the items were likely his. Joanne asked Stephen about the marijuana, and he claimed he did not use it and had kept it at the request of a friend. Joanne asked him to remove everything from the house, and he agreed to do so. The next day, Joanne came home early after work to investigate her growing suspicions. She was shocked to find Tyler and Stephen being intimate. Joanne was stunned to realize that her daughter and Stephen had been lying to her all along. Stephen was worried about going to jail and asked Tyler not to engage in such activities. Joanne remained calm and invited Stephen to talk to her at the park later. Without Tyler present during the conversation, Stephen revealed that he had been intimate with Tyler before moving into their house. The mother was shocked by this revelation, but Joanne decided not to report Stephen to the police. Instead, she suggested that he move out and never contact Tyler again. Stephen agreed and asked for more time to find a new place to live and pack his belongings. The family became very tense when Tyler learned that Stephen would be moving out soon. Tyler became angry with her mother and yelled in response. Joanne pressured Stephen to leave quickly. After 2 days, Stephen moved out. Joanne brought 2 strong men from her workplace to help move Stephen's belongings to the street. They also spoke to Stephen privately. The men told him that he was behaving poorly and warned him to stay away from Tyler or face serious consequences. Stephen agreed to the warning and moved in with friends. But he and Tyler continued to see each other secretly. Now planning to run away together, Joanne was not naive, so she had her concerns. In early June, she found her daughter's diary and read it. What worried Joanne most was that Tyler was intimate with Stephen without using contraception, putting her at risk of becoming pregnant. Joanne realized that her daughter was infatuated with Stephen, and the diary indicated that Tyler's mental health was deteriorating. The diary entries included disturbing fantasies about Joanne being involved in a tragic accident, suggesting that Tyler wanted to escape from her mother. This worried Joanne. She decided to report Tyler's relationship with Stephen to the police. When the police arrived and spoke to Tyler, she denied having a romantic relationship, claiming that her mother had misunderstood the situation. Tyler explained that she was just changing clothes in Stephen's room when her mother came in. However, Joanne provided the police with a diary that contained evidence of inappropriate intimacy. She showed the police a towel from Tyler's bed, thinking it might have traces of Stephen's DNA. When Tyler discovered this, they got into a loud argument that was heard by Joanne's neighbors. During the argument, Joanne called the police twice, claiming that her daughter was being aggressive. Patrol officers arrived and took Tyler to the station for questioning, but they released her after a few hours. Meanwhile, Joanne sought psychotherapy for her daughter, concerned that she might have serious mental health issues due to substance abuse. The situation seemed to have calmed down. Eventually, Tyler settled down, and her mother watched over her for the next few days. Tyler kept calling Stephen because she missed him, but due to pressure from the police, she was reluctant to talk to him. Tyler complained of stomach pains, loss of appetite, and migraines. She frequently asked to meet, hoping to gain sympathy. Gradually, Stephen agreed to meet her during the summer school holidays. He would sometimes pick her up, and they would spend time together in his car. When Joanne relaxed her surveillance of Tyler, Stephen started visiting his lover while Joanne was at work. Stephen would sneak through the fence to avoid being seen by the security cameras at the entrance. They continued to be intimate, but the only change in their relationship was how often they could see each other. They could only be together when Tyler's mother was not home, which frustrated Tyler more than ever. She blamed her mother for ruining her happy relationship and forbade them from seeing each other. Tyler also visited Stephen under the pretext of meeting friends, suspecting that their relationship was still ongoing. Her mother went to the police again. The girl was questioned, but she denied her relationship with Stephen. He also denied the relationship during questioning, with no evidence to support these claims. The couple was released once again on June 11, 2009. Joanne returned home from work and took her daughter, Tyler, to the store, exhausted by their recent arguments. Joanne wanted to mend their relationship. She apologized to Tyler for reading her diary and expressed sympathy for her daughter's feelings. To cheer her up, Joanne bought Tyler her favorite candy and ice cream, and Tyler seemed pleased with their reconciliation. After returning home, Joanne went straight to her room while Tyler played video games until 10 p.m. Unfortunately, a tragic event occurred that night. Joanne was home alone, so no one immediately noticed that she was missing when she did not show up for work the next day, June 12. Her absence did not immediately raise any alarms. Her co-workers thought she might be dealing with issues related to her daughter and assumed she was busy. Joanne's boss tried to contact her, but she did not answer her calls. Her co-workers later recalled that she had mentioned plans to go on a trip with Tyler, so they believed she was away and decided to wait until Monday to find out more. On Monday, June 15, when she still did not show up for work, her co-worker began trying to contact Joanne. She did not answer her phone. So later in the day, he contacted the police to request a welfare check. In the evening, the police went to her home but were unable to gain entry because no one answered the door. The officers then contacted Joanne's relatives for assistance. They were able to reach her father, who arrived in time and used a spare key to open the door. Inside, they found Joanne lying on the bed, dead for several days. The attacker had left the air conditioning running to slow the body's decomposition. The victim was identified by her father as Joanne. Forensic experts arrived at the scene to collect evidence, while the police began interviewing neighbors and family members. Everyone agreed that Joanne was a kind person with no enemies, but they noted her troubled relationship with her daughter, which had escalated into physical altercations. Police discovered that, shortly before her death, Joanne had reported her daughter's boyfriend to the police. This information aroused suspicion, making Tyler and her boyfriend, Stephen, the prime suspects in the case. As the investigation progressed, the couple was placed on the wanted list. The community was shocked by the murder, and the media reported extensively on Joanne's case. Joanne's co-workers reported that, on her last day of work, she left early to talk to her daughter and comfort her. Joanne remained optimistic about the situation, hoping, until the end, that she could control her daughter's rebellious behavior and that everything would be okay. On June 17, 2009, Stephen and Tyler were walking near a shopping mall in San Francisco when one of the patrol officers recognized them and arrested them. In their hotel room, the police discovered a suicide note, a DVD, and the poison they planned to use. Stephen and Tyler were then taken to Sacramento, where they were questioned separately. At first, the couple refused to talk and denied any involvement in the murder. They appeared confused about the situation and the charges against them. When they learned of the incident, they pretended to be surprised, and Tyler began to cry. Although no tears were shed, Stephen and Tyler were later charged and tried as adults. Despite their age, Tyler, who was only 14 at the time of the massacre, could face life in prison without parole if convicted of first-degree murder under state law. As the investigation progressed, the two shared their stories, which differed greatly. Tyler claimed that the night before the murder, she and her mother made up and then went to sleep in their separate rooms. She played video games until 10 p.m. before going to bed. Tyler went into her mother's room and found her asleep. She noticed a glass of wine on the bedside table and that the TV was on, which angered her. Tyler said that her mother had promised to stop drinking earlier, but had not kept her promise. Furious, Tyler called her boyfriend and told him that it was time to put her plan into action. She planned to mix sleeping pills with alcohol for her mother to drink. However, she did not have the medication available and had to wait for Stephen to finish his shift at 10 p.m. and bring it to her house later. When Stephen parked near the backyard fence and tried to call Tyler, her mother had woken up. Tyler then asked him to wait for about 20 minutes. He ended up waiting for nearly 40 minutes because Tyler did not respond to his calls or messages on various apps. Tyler then called Stephen back. Tyler asked him to come into the house, making it clear that he should use the main entrance, which was quite unusual since he usually came in through the fence to avoid being seen. He spent some time playing with the family dogs in the yard until Tyler invited him in. However, Tyler and Stephen have different accounts of what happened next. Tyler said that her boyfriend grabbed a knife and attacked her mother as soon as he entered the house. They had originally planned to do it together, but Tyler panicked, couldn't go through with it, and ran into the bathroom. There, she covered her ears to block out her mother's screams and the chaos outside. Meanwhile, Stephen tried to convince the police that Tyler had opened the door for him while covered in blood, claiming That's when she attacked her mother. Tyler packed up her things and turned on the TV in her mother's room to make it seem like someone was home. She also turned on the air conditioning to help slow the body's decomposition. Tyler closed all the windows and pulled the curtains, and with Stephen's help, they burned the bloody clothes in the fireplace. Tyler then showered and changed into new clothes. They then went to a nearby parking lot to rest and regain their strength before planning their escape. They had planned a trip to San Francisco afterward. They met their mutual friend, Matthew, and told him they were leaving, but initially withheld details about their destination and the reason for their trip. However, by the end of the conversation, they chose to reveal the truth to Matthew. This confession later became crucial evidence against them. Stephen confessed to Matthew that he had attacked Joanne in her neck and abdomen. However, the medical examiner found no injuries to her abdomen. Stephen later claimed that he had lied to protect his girlfriend before their arrest. The couple attempted to carry out a plan to die in the hills. They spent time visiting various locations before deciding to end their lives when police discovered Joanne's body. Stephen and Tyler had taken poison, however, the next morning. Stephen felt completely fine, while Tyler only had a mild stomachache. After their initial approach failed, they began exploring other methods, but none worked until the pair were arrested. Both suspects blamed each other for the murder. The case was complex, making it difficult to solve. Forensic scientists discovered traces of DNA under Joanne's fingernails. Possibly from a struggle, samples were sent for analysis, but the results were inconclusive. The owner of the DNA particles could not be identified, and at that time, DNA testing was not advanced enough to confirm that it was male DNA. Separate trials were scheduled for Tyler and Stephen, and they were held without bail. In September 2010, Tyler, on the advice of her attorney, chose to accept a plea deal from the prosecutor. By that time, she had already served more than a year in prison, which influenced her decision. Tyler agreed to testify against Stephen, helping to establish his first-degree murder conviction. While she would likely face a second-degree murder charge, she was also expected to testify in the abuse case against Stephen. Tyler entered into a plea agreement on September 17, 2010, and Stephen's trial began on May 17, 2011. Stephen's defense argued that he never threatened Joanne. They had a good relationship at first, as her mother treated him like a son when she believed he and her daughter were just friends. Their relationship soured after she learned of their romantic involvement. The defense contended that the daughter was responsible for the conflicts, claiming that she invited Stephen to live with them. Convinced her mother to accept him, they argued that Stephen always tried to avoid conflict and violence. The defense stated that he had worked hard to improve his life until he met Tyler, who shattered his peace and framed him for murder. In his testimony, Stephen said that when he met Tyler, she claimed to be several years older than she actually was, and that she also appeared older. Stephen asserted that Tyler had deceived everyone, including him. Most importantly, Stephen denied killing Joanne. He said that when he entered the house, Tyler was covered in blood. Tyler gave him a knife to clean, which resulted in his fingerprints being found on the murder weapon. Stephen asserted that he had never touched Joanne. He believed that his only wrongdoing was failing to stop Tyler from planning, helping her escape, and failing to call the police. The defense argued that Tyler may have influenced the murder because she was a skilled manipulator and had a history of problematic behavior, especially toward Joanne and others. Stephen only wanted to protect her, so he confessed in front of his friends. Unaware of the severity of the situation, they had agreed to end their lives anyway. The defense also presented Tyler's diary, in which she expressed her feelings about her mother's death, including threats and detailed descriptions of violence. This demonstrated her deliberate intent. Joanne's father confirmed that his daughter cared deeply for Tyler and did everything she could to ensure her safety. However, instead of appreciating this, Tyler became increasingly defiant, which escalated over time. Many people testified that what Joanne's father said was true, and witnesses confirmed Tyler's aggressive behavior. One day, A family friend witnessed Tyler slap her mother in the face, but Joanne did not react. This made her so anxious that she often cried alone and tried to relieve her sadness by drinking. Although many others insisted that she was not an alcoholic because she knew when to stop. During the trial, Matthew, a close friend of the couple, revealed that they had confessed to attacking Joanne. Matthew mentioned a wound to Joanne's abdomen that was allegedly caused by Stephen, but forensic experts could not find any such wounds. This allowed the defense to emphasize Stephen's dishonesty in an attempt to protect his loved one. After the plea deal, Tyler testified against Stephen in court. She said that she and Stephen had gone to her mother's room with knives, but at the last minute, she got scared and hid to avoid hearing any of her mother's screams, which meant she blamed her boyfriend. Stephen's lawyers argued that Tyler's testimony was more about reducing her own sentence than seeking justice. As part of her plea agreement, she was supposed to help the police find the murder weapon. The last time Matthew saw the knife, the couple showed it to him and explained what happened before they left for San Francisco. They claimed to have thrown it into a storm drain, but the police did not find it. It is possible the knife was washed away by the water. The prosecution claimed that male DNA was found under Joanne's fingernails, while there was no female DNA. However, defense attorneys and an expert argued that the DNA could have been there due to normal interactions with any other man, suggesting that the evidence did not conclusively prove guilt. The prosecutor believed Stephen was the killer and supported this claim by highlighting his antisocial behavior, difficulty interacting with others, lack of friends, fondness for cold weapons, and his knife collection. Additionally, a diary belonging to Stephen was discovered, which contained entries about his deep love for Tyler and his willingness to do anything for her. The prosecutor argued that these sentiments could imply murderous intent. On June 14, 2011, the jury began deliberations, which lasted several hours. Stephen Paul Culver was convicted of first-degree murder for the death of Joanne Witt. He broke down in tears as he left the courthouse. Joanne's father was upset that his granddaughter described Joanne as an alcoholic who would incite violence against her own child. In his view, this description did not reflect the truth. Joanne had devoted her life to ensuring Tyler's happiness instead of receiving gratitude. She suffered a tragic fate. On August 12, 2011, the judge announced the verdict. Stephen Paul Culver was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Meanwhile, Tyler Witt pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, waived his right to a jury trial, and waived his right to appeal. Tyler Witt was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Michelle Linehan. In 1994, Michelle Linehan, then known as Michelle Hughes, left Louisiana and moved to New York to work for a modeling agency. However, her stay in New York did not last long, and Michelle quickly changed her career path. When she moved to Alaska, she began working as a stripper at the Great Alaskan Bush Company, which not only brought in a substantial income, but also helped her attract the attention of many men who wanted to marry her here. Michelle continued this work for several months until she met Kent Lepink. Kent appeared modest and reserved, but Michelle's parents described him as impulsive and prone to losing control. Like Michelle, Kent was also trying to start over. After being caught stealing money from his family's business in Michigan, he fled to Alaska. Seeing it as the perfect place to leave his troubles behind, Kent believed meeting Michelle was fate. The two began dating immediately, and within a month, Kent proposed. However, Michelle wasn't in a hurry to give him an answer. When Kent introduced Michelle to his parents, they immediately noticed that she seemed distant toward him. When he hugged her, she instinctively pulled away, making it clear that Michelle didn't truly love Kent. His mother began to suspect that Michelle had been seeing other men, and what Kent's mother felt was right. When traveling salesman Scott Hilka met Michelle at the club in late 1994, He too fell in love with her. They quickly developed a deep relationship. Then, in the summer of 1995, a widower named John Carlin entered the picture. John, a single father who had recently lost his wife to cancer, although soon discovered Michelle's other relationships. He had already fallen in love with her and also proposed. Remarkably, both Kent and John, the two men, were aware of each other for several months. John, Kent, and Michelle even lived in the same house in Anchorage. This wasn't just a love triangle, it was a complex web of relationships. People at the strip club where Michelle worked believed she was simply skilled at manipulating others. She took full advantage of her relationships, receiving money, lavish gifts, and financial support from her admirers. Other dancers didn't find the gifts unusual, as club patrons often gave such presents to gain the women's attention. However, no one truly believed Michelle intended to marry any of these men. All of them were at least 10 years older than her, but she had a way of charming each one. She skillfully played her game. Knowing exactly how to manipulate and control the men in her life, Michelle insisted that she never asked for more than what they were willing and able to give. Meanwhile, Kent remained hopeful and genuinely believed he was preparing for a wedding with Michelle. In preparation for this momentous occasion, Kent's father planned to travel to Anchorage in the spring of 1996 to meet his future daughter-in-law. However, shortly before his arrival, she suddenly disappeared. When Kent's father reached Anchorage, he found his son in a state of grief. After a brief visit, he returned to Michigan without fulfilling his purpose. On May 2, 1996, Kent's body was discovered along a deserted road. 80 miles south of Anchorage, he had been attacked 3 times, in the back, chest, and head. His body was found by accident when electricians working nearby noticed his bright red jacket. That same day, a letter arrived at his parents' home. The letter contained instructions that it should only be opened in the event of his death. When his parents received the letter, they immediately tried to contact him, but were unable to reach him. The exact time of Kent's death could not be determined, but forensic experts estimated that he had died 1 or 2 days before his body was discovered. Shell casings were found near the body, but the murder weapon was missing. When the Leppink family learned of the tragedy, Kent's mother immediately remembered the letter her son had left behind, still sealed as he had instructed. At the same time, investigators at the crime scene were unaware that critical evidence was not there, but was instead in the possession of Kent's parents. The letter said that if he died under suspicious circumstances, John, Michelle, or Scott Hilke could be held responsible. He also requested one more thing, which was to ensure that Michelle would spend a long time in prison. Kent clearly suspected Michelle and one of her lovers of plotting to kill him. His parents immediately contacted the police and handed over the letter he had written. When detectives opened the envelope, they quickly realized that this case would be anything but straightforward. The letter provided critical clues and leads, prompting them to thoroughly investigate everyone involved in the love triangle. Scott said he was surprised to learn he was being investigated. As he was not in Alaska at the time of the murder, investigators reviewed all airline and phone records and determined that Scott was not in Alaska, so he was cleared of any involvement in Kent's death. The following day, detectives questioned a woman, Kent's close friend. At the police station, she broke down in tears upon learning that Kent had been violently killed. During her questioning, she revealed that Kent owned a weapon and mentioned a significant detail. Kent had a $1 million life insurance policy, with Michelle listed as the beneficiary. This could be Michelle's motive for harming Kent. However, investigators discovered that just days before his death, Kent had removed Michelle as the beneficiary. Meanwhile, Michelle was unaware and still had a motive for the murder. A few days after Kent's body was found, police searched his car and discovered another envelope in the glove compartment. This letter seemed to be a correspondence between Michelle and John Carlin. In it, they discussed how John had supposedly bought a cabin at Lake Tahoe and invited Michelle to spend the weekend there. However, detectives uncovered that John hadn't actually purchased any property. It was a lie. The whole situation seemed staged. As if John and Michelle were exchanging messages designed for Kent to find, the letter appeared intended to provoke Kent's jealousy and prompt him to travel to the lake, near where Kent's body was found. But why would they do this? Was it a trap to lure Kent? According to the police, the plan seemed to have worked. Kent had apparently become jealous, and it all ended with 3 weapon wounds. The problem was that this was all based on speculation, no concrete evidence, no witnesses, and not even the murder weapon. A few months into the investigation, the lead investigators were reassigned to another precinct, causing the case to lose momentum and eventually come to a complete halt despite several pieces of circumstantial evidence. No charges were ever filed. At the time, Hilke was living in California. Carlin and Michelle each left shortly after the murders. Michelle settled in Olympia, Washington, seemingly starting a new life and leaving her past behind. After moving to Olympia, Michelle began attending college, pursuing studies in biology and psychology. She later earned a master's degree in public administration in 1998. She married a young doctor named Colin Linehan in New Orleans, and they welcomed a daughter a year later in 2004. A new cold case unit was formed in Alaska to reopen unsolved cases. The 8-year-old crime quickly became a priority. As evidence strongly pointed toward Michelle and John, Michelle became the main suspect in planning the murder, while John was believed to be the one who pulled the trigger for 8 years. The case remained inactive until new detectives showed up at Michelle's suburban home. They asked her to clarify some statements she had made following the murder. By then, Michelle was no longer working as a stripper. She admitted that she had only viewed the job as a temporary way to make money and had left it behind as soon as she could. Colin, a successful physician, was just as shocked as Michelle when the police arrived at their door. By that time, they had been together for 6 years and were living a stable, fulfilling life that seemed to embody the American dream. However, this perfect image was now in jeopardy in Olympia. Michelle's friends were stunned to learn that behind her image as a perfect mother, churchgoer, parent-teacher committee member, businesswoman, and devoted wife, there was a tumultuous past. Authorities began preparing to seize several personal computers used by Michelle, although much of the data on the computers had been deleted. Investigators managed to recover a significant portion. Among the restored files were emails and correspondence between Michelle, Kent, John, and Scott Hilke. It became clear that Michelle had captivated the hearts of all 3 men, telling each one he was the most important person in her life while dismissing the others as mere toys to cover her expenses. These revelations exposed the manipulative dynamics of their relationships, but did not provide enough solid evidence to charge her with murder. There were, however, incriminating findings in the case. Investigators focused on a letter sent the day before the murder, which discussed Seychelles, a country offering citizenship for a substantial fee. The key detail in the letter was Michelle's question about whether Seychelles had an extradition agreement with the U.S. and if it would extradite criminals. However, this alone was not enough to press charges, adding to the complexity. The murder weapon was identified as a .44 caliber Desert Eagle, a distinctive weapon initially. John denied ever owning such a weapon. However, a surprising witness came forward, John's son, who was a child at the time of the crime but had grown into an adult by 2005. He decided to assist in the investigation of this decades-old case, which he had partially witnessed. The son revealed that shortly before the murder, his father had purchased a weapon after seeing a newspaper ad. He claimed to have seen the weapon the day after Kent was killed. It was in the bathroom sink, being cleaned with some kind of chemical, and his father appeared to be handling it carefully. The son could not identify the weapon's model or describe its appearance. In this tangled love triangle, orchestrated by the dancer. It seemed possible that John had been the one to acquire the weapon from the beginning of the investigation. Michele insisted that she was cooperating with law enforcement and denied any involvement in Kent's death. By the fall of 2006, investigators believed they had gathered enough evidence to charge both Michele and John Carlin with first-degree murder. Michele was able to post bail immediately and return to her family in Washington while awaiting trial. Although she was required to wear an ankle monitor and adhere to strict restrictions, John, however, was denied bail and spent 6 months in custody before the trial, maintaining his innocence throughout. In court, the prosecutors portrayed Michele as a cunning manipulator who sought to profit from the romantic entanglements she had created. Michele's attorneys argued that the case against her was based entirely on circumstantial evidence, giving them hope for a favorable verdict. John's legal team, on the other hand, shifted suspicion to others, even accusing John's own son, who had testified against him. They claimed Michele was the true mastermind behind the murder, a manipulative seductress who orchestrated the crime, possibly by court, convincing someone else to carry it out. The defense proposed several theories, including the claim that Michele herself had killed Kent, one of her lovers. To collect a $1 million insurance payout, the prosecution argued that John had spent a large amount of money on Michele, whom he deeply loved. When one of her other lovers pulled away, they claimed the only obstacle between John and his happiness with Michele was Kent. Prosecutors alleged that John and Michele had crafted a plan involving a fake letter to lure Kent to the location where he was murdered. Asserting that this letter had set the crime into motion, John contended that the letter was merely a joke created by Michele to make Kent jealous and end their relationship. The prosecution went on to present Michele's exchanges with her lovers, including one between her and John, who stated that he would do anything for her, even risk his life. To the prosecution, this suggested that her lovers might have been willing to commit murder for her. They also highlighted emails referencing the Seychelles and escaping justice, which they argued reinforced their case. The defense countered that, aside from circumstantial evidence, most of the emails were vague and open to multiple interpretations. After 4 days of deliberation, the jury found John Carlin guilty of first-degree murder. John was sentenced to 99 years in prison when Michele's trial began. She claimed that she never considered Kent her fiancé, as she had repeatedly turned down his marriage proposals and had agreed only to marry Scott. However, Scott and Michele's relationship fell apart before the crime occurred. The defense argued that Kent had significant personal issues. Claiming he had become a nuisance to Michele, they alleged that he stalked her, monitored her every move, gathered information about her bank accounts and phone records, knew her social security number, and even read her emails. Over time, Michele reportedly realized he was stalking her and began to fear him. She supported these claims, which angered Kent's parents, who accused her of distorting the story. Michele's defenders also described Kent as an unusual individual who had been struggling with mental health problems. They attributed the disturbing letters he sent home to his mental state at the time. The defense attempted to clarify Kent's misconceptions regarding his relationship with Michele. He was fully preparing for a wedding despite her refusal. In the end, it was supposedly too difficult for him to acknowledge that he had been so mistaken, and thus, revenge seemed like a viable option to him. However, the defense argued that this did not make Michele a bad person, let alone a murderer. They also raised concerns about the email exchanges, contending that it was inappropriate to edit or delete portions of the messages to leave only incriminating statements. The defense further disputed the assertion that Michele had committed the crime or that she was the mastermind behind it. Under Alaska law, if it could be proven that Michele was involved in planning the murder, her actions would legally be considered equivalent to pulling the trigger. Even the attorneys expressed concerns that Michele's past might prevent the jury from recognizing her as the educated wife and mother she had become. Surprisingly, a former dancer who had worked with Michelle at a club testified for the prosecution. This witness kept a detailed diary in which she noted the favorite films of her friends and acquaintances. She claimed that Michelle was particularly obsessed with the 1994 film, The Last Seduction, a story that paralleled Kent's case. In the movie, the female protagonist manipulates her lover into killing her husband to collect insurance money. The witness asserted that Michelle often referred to this film as her favorite, admired the lead character, and aspired to be like her. The defense disputed the testimony, stating that Michelle did not have access to a weapon matching the one used in the crime. Additionally, the defense argued that Michelle had taken steps to remove herself from Kent's insurance policy shortly before the murder. The prosecution countered this claim, arguing that Michelle was not canceling her involvement, but merely clarifying beneficiary details. However, Kent had already changed the beneficiaries before his death, leaving Michelle with nothing. During the hearings, Michelle remained calm and chose not to testify before the jury, consistently asserting her innocence and claiming she had nothing to hide. The defense presented her husband, Colin, as a key witness to challenge the claim that Michelle could be a murderer or the mastermind behind the crime. Colin played a crucial role in defending Michelle's character, which the prosecution had tried to tarnish. He shared that, although he was aware of Michelle's past work as a stripper, he admired her determination to take that job to pay for college and create a better future for herself. The defense argued that the prosecution's case against Michelle relied entirely on circumstantial evidence and lacked any concrete proof. The trial lasted 5 weeks, followed by 2 days of jury deliberation. On October 22, 2007, Michelle was convicted of first-degree murder. The verdict was devastating for Michelle. Her fiancé Colin and their daughter, Kent's relatives, feel relieved and partially fulfilled Kent's last wish before he was killed. Michelle's attorney, however, was determined to keep fighting. The defense team filed an appeal, focusing on the missing murder weapon and the questionable evidence used to convict her. The rare weapon, believed to have been used to kill Kent, could potentially exonerate her, but it had not been found even more than a decade after the crime. After John Carlin began serving his sentence, he reportedly admitted to owning a weapon matching the description, a Desert Eagle of the same caliber as the murder weapon. John claimed he had lied earlier out of fear, believing he was being hunted and would be jailed based on his testimony. According to him, his weapon went missing shortly before the crime, but later reappeared. He explained that he had been forced to clean it with a chemical solution to remove fingerprints and then disposed of it by throwing it into a garbage container. All the while, John continues to insist that he did not kill Kent. After the hearings, Michelle was sent to a women's prison in Alaska, where she awaited sentencing. She was eventually sentenced to 99 years in prison. During this time, Michelle's husband frequently traveled to Alaska to visit her, striving to support both her and their family. 2 years later, Michelle's attorney successfully overturned her first-degree murder conviction. A significant development arose when John Carlin, who had been beaten to death in a lodge prison fight in 2008, while his appeal was still pending, became central to the case. Since Michelle's conviction had been primarily based on John's testimony, the court dismissed the case following his death. This marked a turning point in Michelle's favor. On February 5, 2010, the Alaska Court of Appeals overturned Michelle's conviction. While awaiting a retrial, Michelle was released on $250 bail. During the retrial, the prosecution was prohibited from referencing her previous conviction, the movie, or the victim's letters, as these were deemed speculative. As a result, the case against Michelle began to look much weaker. Kent's parents attended the hearings and were shocked to learn of Michelle's release. On December 13, 2011, Anchorage Superior Court Judge Philip Volland dismissed the murder charge against Michelle. Due to the prosecution's inability to prove her guilt, Michelle resumed her life in Washington, where she now runs a laser surgery clinic after John Carlin's death in prison. His son filed a lawsuit against the state of Alaska and received $160 in compensation for his father's death. Kent's father passed away in 2014, but Kent's mother continues to visit Alaska. She considers it the only place where she feels close to her son and remains committed to seeking justice. Each visit, however, reminds her of the guilt she feels for being unable to fulfill Kent's final wish, as described in his letters. In the end, no one was ever held accountable for Kent's murder. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Stephanie Fernandez. In 2009, Stephanie Fernandez was living in Massachusetts with her 6-year-old daughter, Angelina. Stephanie, a single mother, was struggling financially and had no money to support them. She had learned to dance while she was in school and was quite flexible to make ends meet. Stephanie decided to earn money by dancing in nightclubs and performing for men. She kept her work a secret from Angelina, who only knew that her mother worked nights. One night at work, Stephanie noticed a handsome man staring at her after her performance. She approached him, and they talked for an hour. His name was Andrew Wagner. During their first conversation, they seemed to get along well and discovered they had a lot in common. Stephanie gave him her phone number, and they arranged to meet after her shift, where they both admitted their feelings for each other at the time. Andrew worked at a tire shop, but he aspired to be a police officer and was looking for an opportunity in that field. Stephanie and Andrew's relationship progressed quickly. She introduced Andrew to her daughter, Angelina, and they soon began living together. Angelina called Andrew her stepfather and treated him like a friend. They enjoyed spending time together, often watching television. However, over time, their love began to fade. Andrew and Stephanie started to argue, largely because Andrew was upset with Stephanie's job as a dancer in a nightclub. He wanted her to perform only for him and was unhappy that she continued to work there, even though Stephanie had quit her job for a while. Their arguments continued. One day, Angelina witnessed Andrew grabbing her mother's head and nearly slamming her into a wall, despite their troubled relationship. In 2012, 3 years after they first met, Andrew proposed to Stephanie and gave her a ring. She happily accepted his proposal and agreed to marry him. At the same time, Andrew started a new job at a correctional facility, bringing him closer to his dream of working in law enforcement. It seemed like their relationship had improved. But by early 2013, Stephanie decided to leave Andrew and rekindle her relationship with her ex-boyfriend Michael, who was 13 years her senior. Stephanie and Michael first met when she was 19 and he was 32. They began dating in the early 20s, but their relationship ended after a while. In 2013, when Stephanie was 30, she rekindled her relationship with Michael a few months later. He proposed to her at the same place they had first met and gave her a $44 ring. Stephanie accepted his proposal, but just a month later, they had a serious argument at Michael's house. During the argument, Stephanie picked up a kitchen knife and swung it at him. Michael disarmed her, and it seemed like the matter was resolved. However, the conflict escalated during another argument. This time, Stephanie picked up a knife again, and Michael defended himself by using a chair as a shield. Stephanie stabbed the chair 4 times before leaving the room. Concerned for their safety, Michael gathered all the knives in the house and hid them. After these incidents, Michael decided that he did not want to marry Stephanie anymore and broke off the engagement just a month after the proposal. In late 2013, Stephanie got back together with Andrew and moved into a new house with him. After moving to their new home in Massachusetts, tensions flared again between Andrew and Stephanie. They decided it was time to plan for a pregnancy and set a wedding date for October 2014. On the evening of May 7, 2014, Stephanie put her daughter Angelina to bed on the second floor and went into the kitchen to prepare dinner. Andrew was in the living room, watching TV. That night, they each had 2 glasses of wine. During the conversation, Andrew began asking Stephanie what she had done that week while he was at work. Andrew accused Stephanie of cheating on him, and the couple began to argue. After a while, Andrew expressed a desire to be intimate, but Stephanie refused. In a fit of anger, he threw her onto the couch, grabbed her by the neck with one hand, and tried to pull down her pants. He then grabbed a nearby weapon and pointed it at Stephanie's head, threatening her. When Andrew backed away, and Stephanie quickly ran into the kitchen to grab a knife, telling him to stay away from her. After this encounter, Andrew became even angrier. He grabbed her head and tried to smash it against the wall. In desperation, Stephanie attacked him with the knife. Andrew fell to the floor, and she began to cry loudly. Unable to find a phone to call 911, she ran to her neighbor, who was a nurse, for help. The neighbor opened the door. Not knowing what was happening, she saw Stephanie standing there in a t-shirt and sweatpants. Stephanie desperately called for help, saying that her fiancé was bleeding. She explained that she had injured him in self-defense because he had threatened her with a weapon. Hearing the emergency, the neighbor and his wife, who had worked as paramedics, quickly rushed to Andrew's house. When they entered, they saw the weapon Andrew had threatened his wife with lying on the sofa. They then found Andrew lying on the floor. His lips were black and blue, and there was a film covering his eyes. The neighbors found Andrew with a deep wound to his neck. They then took off his shirt to try to stop the bleeding. Meanwhile, the neighbor's daughter ran into Andrew's house, called 911, and reported the situation. During this time, Stephanie was nearby, screaming and crying nonstop. At one point, she pushed Andrew, trying to wake him up. The neighbors yelled at Stephanie to stop and told her to be quiet. They then did everything they could to save him. At this point, Stephanie's screams woke up her daughter, Angelina, who was sleeping on the second floor. She left her room and went downstairs. Angelina saw a horrifying scene, prompting Stephanie to order her to go back to her room and away from the traumatic scene. At this point, Andrew had stopped breathing. The neighbors began CPR and continued until the police and ambulance arrived. Paramedics instructed the neighbors to stay back while they assessed Andrew's condition and took him to the hospital. The police then searched the house and discovered a kitchen knife on the bathroom floor, which was determined to be the murder weapon. Angelina was taken to stay with a relative, worried about her mother. She became hysterical. Stephanie was taken to the police station, where she was questioned for 3 hours. She cried and begged for information about Andrew. Expressing her love for him and her family, she was extremely distressed, saying that she did not care about her fate as long as Andrew was alive. During the questioning, Stephanie asked about her daughter. The police also noted a large bruise on Stephanie's face and a bite mark on her hand. At the end of the interrogation, they informed Stephanie that Andrew had died in the hospital. Upon hearing this, Stephanie confessed that she had attacked Andrew with a knife in self-defense, stating that she had no other choice. After her confession, she was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The medical examiner determined that Andrew died from blood loss due to his injuries, and his injuries indicated that he had not attempted to defend himself. There was a small amount of alcohol in his blood. On June 13, 2014, nearly a month after the incident, Andrew's father went to his son's house to change the locks and discovered that someone had cleaned the house and wiped all the blood off the walls and floors. It was revealed that Stephanie's sister had hired a cleaning service, which cleaned the house on May 20. Stephanie provided the police with a photo from 2010 showing her with a black eye. Claiming that Andrew had attacked her, she recounted an incident in which Andrew became angry over the t-shirt she was wearing. He allegedly grabbed her, threw her onto the bed, tore the t-shirt off, and then held a weapon to her head. Stephanie stated that when Andrew was angry, he could be very intimidating. Cell phone records revealed that the relationship between Andrew and Stephanie was troubled and turbulent. The police had to review 18 pages of text messages on one particular day in August 2013. A photo of a deep cut on Andrew's right forearm was found on his phone that same day. He texted Stephanie asking for help because the wound was bleeding profusely, but she replied that it was none of her business and that she would not assist him in calling the police. Stephanie admitted that they had an argument and that she had accidentally injured his hand in September 2013. Andrew sent Stephanie an angry text message accusing her of having an affair with Michael, and he insulted Michael in the process. In her reply, Stephanie admitted that she was indeed dating Michael. After this exchange, Stephanie sent private photos of herself to both Andrew and Michael within hours of each other. About a month later, in October 2013, Stephanie told Andrew that Michael wanted to adopt Angelina. In that text message, she stated that she did not care about his future. Andrew informed Stephanie that he planned to buy a house and wanted to meet her for a serious talk. Meanwhile, she also sent affectionate text messages to her ex-fiancé, Michael, who had called off their engagement. Stephanie invited Michael to go on vacation together and asked him for money for yacht. But Michael declined and suggested that she find another job. In December 2013, Stephanie went on yacht and began texting Andrew, sharing how much fun she was having. She also asked him if he had a girlfriend after the cruise. Stephanie reconciled with Andrew and moved into his new home. Their text messages revealed that she had become pregnant shortly after they got back together. Although things seemed to be improving, Stephanie frequently expressed to Andrew that she felt abandoned by his long hours and lack of communication. In January 2014, at a doctor's appointment, Stephanie received the devastating news that her baby's heartbeat had stopped. She texted Andrew, saying that she felt like she had lost a part of herself. Andrew's parents noticed that their son was becoming more distant and that their communication was decreasing. In February 2014, just 3 months before the tragedy, Andrew's mother tried to contact him but was unable to reach him by phone. Concerned, she and her husband went to the house where Andrew lived with Stephanie. When they arrived, they saw both their cars in the driveway but received no response after ringing the doorbell several times. After about 15 minutes, Andrew finally opened the door to let his parents in. They spent some time talking and exploring the first floor of the new home. Shortly after, Stephanie came down from the second floor and told Andrew's parents to leave. They quietly left the house and drove away. Andrew's parents accused Stephanie of trying to prevent their son from communicating with the family. 8 years after the tragedy, in early 2022, the trial for the murder of Andrew Wagner began. Stephanie was placed under house arrest with a Jeep's ankle bracelet that tracked her movements. Prosecutors argued that Stephanie was guilty of premeditated murder, while Stephanie's defense attorney claimed she acted in self-defense. Prosecutors presented witnesses who testified that they saw Stephanie lose her temper and attack her fiancé multiple times. Stephanie's ex-husband, Michael, testified that she had confessed to him multiple times that Andrew Wagner had attacked her and hit her in the face. However, Michael never saw any bruises or injuries on her. A friend and co-worker at the nightclub where Stephanie worked stated that she often saw bruises on Stephanie's arms, which Stephanie covered up with makeup. Another friend, a dancer, recounted an incident where Andrew came to the club and got into a fight with Stephanie. After the fight, he sat on a bench and began drinking a cocktail that contained 2 bullets at the bottom of the glass. A co-worker informed security about this. But when they approached Andrew, the bullets were no longer in the glass. Stephanie's sister was called to testify in court. She stated that she had a close relationship with Stephanie and often discussed Stephanie's relationship with Andrew, whom she had met only 10 times The sister observed bruises on Stephanie's legs, arms, face, and neck, and she believed that these injuries were caused by Andrew. Despite this, Stephanie continued to defend him to their family. Stephanie's sister shared another disturbing incident that occurred during a karaoke night with Stephanie and Andrew. During that night, the couple got into a fight due to Andrew's jealousy, and he attacked Stephanie in a bathroom stall. When she emerged, she was crying and her hair was disheveled. Stephanie begged her sister not to reveal what had happened. When they returned home, tensions flared again between Stephanie and Andrew, prompting her sister to comment on the bathroom fight. This remark only added to Andrew's anger, causing him to throw Stephanie to the ground and threaten her with a weapon. Fortunately, he soon released her. After the incident, Stephanie's sister urged her to break up with Andrew. Despite these events, neither of them reported the violence to the police. Stephanie reflected on what had happened. She felt confused and uncertain about her next steps, lacking money and housing. She lived with Andrew and endured his abuse. The judge found Stephanie Fernandez guilty of manslaughter, and she was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Her daughter, Angelina Fernandez, is now studying to become a psychologist. She looks forward to working in court, supporting victims and their families, and eagerly anticipates the day she can be reunited with her mother. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case, the case of Robert Denton. Bristol is a city in Sullivan County, Tennessee, United States. The surrounding landscape is dominated by hills and forests. Among the trees are scattered homes, many of which sit on secluded plots of land, slightly removed from the roads below. At approximately 5:45 p.m. on August 29, 2015, a local homeowner, who worked the night shift and was asleep at the time, was awakened by the sound of gunfire. He recounted stepping out onto his porch, looking around, and then heading back inside. He initially thought everything was normal since there was a hunting site nearby. However, he found it strange that this time the gunfire was rapid and stopped abruptly. Another local resident was in his backyard when the shooting began. He said he heard 10 to 12 shots followed by shouting, with the entire incident lasting less than a minute. After the sound of gunfire stopped, he saw a man running down the driveway of a neighboring house, where the driveway met the main road. The trees cleared, making the scene visible. The man attempted to get into a car to escape, but his pursuer was close behind. A few more shots rang out before the car sped off down the road. That evening, 19-year-old Robert Denton called 911 after being attacked in his left arm. Despite his injury, he managed to drive to a neighbor's house to contact emergency services. Robert reported that his grandmother, mother, and stepfather had been attacked within 5 minutes. Police arrived and began searching for the shooter. Soon, the narrow rural road was filled with ambulances. A medical helicopter landed in a field near the scene to take the surviving victims to Johnson City Medical Center. Inside the home, officers found 2 women dead: Lena Rose, 57, and her daughter, Toshia Milhorn, 39. Toshia's husband, James Milhorn, was found unconscious on the porch with severe injuries. He was taken to hospital but later died. At the time of the shooting, 6 children were in the house. 5 were siblings, and the 6th was a visiting friend. A 7-year-old girl sustained non-life-threatening injuries, and none of the other children were harmed. Toshia and James had been married for about 4 years. Both also had children from previous marriages. James worked as a paramedic and firefighter for several agencies. He enjoyed restoring old cars and doing mechanical work in his free time. Toshia and James were remembered as loving, funny, and cherished by their family, friends, Those who knew them were left shocked and confused as to why anyone would want to harm them. The property where this tragedy occurred belonged to Toshia's parents, Curtis and Lena Rose, who had been married for 40 years. Toshia and her husband had moved in temporarily, intending to stay for just a few months while completing work on their trailer at the crime scene. Curtis said that, after he found out relatives were attacked, Robert had already run out of the house and was fleeing down the driveway, believing his grandson was responsible for the murders. Curtis chased after Robert while running. Curtis called emergency services and caught up with Robert at the end of the driveway. He fired one attack that hit Robert's car window and another that struck Robert in the arm, despite being wounded. Robert managed to flee in his car when the police arrived. Curtis directed them toward Robert, but by then, Robert had already disappeared behind the house's back door. Near the laundry room leading to the kitchen, a rifle and a camouflage jacket were found on the ground, which was identified as the murder weapon. 7 shell casings were recovered at the scene, matching the ammunition Robert had with him when emergency responders transported him to the hospital. Investigators determined that Robert had purchased this weapon at a military surplus store. A few weeks prior to the incident, a manhunt was launched for Robert. He then was arrested and charged with 6 counts, 3 for first-degree murder and 3 additional charges, 2 for aggravated assault and 1 for reckless endangerment. In February 2016, Robert pleaded not guilty after considering all factors, including his age at the time of the crime. The death penalty was removed. If he were to be convicted of the murders, Robert was held on $1 million bail. No charges were filed against Curtis, as law enforcement concluded that his account was consistent with the physical evidence. Curtis's version of events was accepted by law enforcement and became the foundation of their understanding of the massacre. Robert Denton, commonly known as Seth, was primarily raised by his grandparents. His mother, Toshia, reportedly struggled with mental health issues, including bipolar disorder. And Robert himself may have faced similar challenges. He briefly joined the military, but was later discharged and returned to live with his grandparents for a time. As a young adult, Robert sought independence and moved into a local apartment with a roommate. Shortly before the murders, Robert lost his job at a fast food restaurant. He had no criminal history or known violent tendencies, according to relatives and friends. However, Robert deeply resented his mother after interviewing those close to him. Authorities believe they were able to piece together the events leading up to the tragedy. Robert reportedly drove to his grandparents' house, parking at the bottom of a steep dirt driveway at approximately 1:45 p.m. He exited the car, put on a camouflage jacket, retrieved a semi-automatic rifle, and walked up the driveway past an above-ground pool before entering the house through the back door. Once inside, he swiftly attacks all 3 victims within seconds. Police were unable to determine the exact order in which the victims were attacked. After the attacks, Robert went outside, removed the camouflage jacket, and left it next to the weapon. He then crossed the property to his grandfather's trailer, where his grandfather was working, and knocked on the window. Robert is said to have called his grandfather out, apparently to urge him to call 911. Detectives believe Robert intentionally avoided involving children or his grandfather in the attack. They suspect his primary target was Toshia, while Lena and James were likely killed because they were present and witnesses to the murder. In late 2016, during jury selection at the Sullivan County Courthouse, Robert unexpectedly disrupted the proceedings. After several hours, the judge announced a brief recess when the trial resumed. Robert had already even threatened to dismiss his attorneys Robert's defense team presented an alternative version of events. They accused his grandfather, Curtis Rose, of committing the murders and argued that investigators had made critical mistakes, particularly by ignoring evidence pointing to Curtis as the shooter rather than Robert. They pointed out that on the day of the incident, police allegedly asked no further questions about Curtis's involvement. Deputies from the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office who spoke with Curtis at the scene similarly avoided pressing him with follow-up questions. Besides, Robert's roommate testified for the prosecution to help establish a motive. He explained to the jury that Robert had expressed deep hatred for his mother over the years. Robert had frequently threatened to kill her, though family and friends who heard these threats dismissed them as immature outbursts rather than genuine intent. They never believed he would act on them. Another friend of Seth's also testified that a few months before the murders, he and Robert visited a military surplus store. At the store, Robert purchased 2 firearms. The store owner later confirmed the firearm purchase and verified the serial numbers. The defense argued that the strongest piece of evidence in the prosecution's case was the testimony of Curtis Rose, who had previously admitted to attacking Robert. Curtis once again recounted the events of that day. He explained that Robert had knocked on the side of the trailer to get his attention. Curtis then glanced into the room and, in a rush, ran into the house. Once inside, Curtis saw his daughter slumped unnaturally in a dining chair, covered in blood. Realizing she was dead, he desperately searched the entire house for his wife, Lena. Eventually, Curtis returned to the living room after checking the bedroom. At this point, Curtis noticed his son-in-law, James, lying on the front porch and making noises that caught his attention. He then went into the kitchen, where he found his wife dead. Sitting between the table and the refrigerator, after discovering her body, Curtis returned to the bedroom to retrieve a gun. He then got into his van and drove down to the lower part of the driveway. He admitted that, at this time, he intended to kill Robert. Robert later testified. Providing his account of the events, he explained that, on that Saturday evening, he had called his aunt to ask where his mother was living because he wanted to visit his grandfather, with whom he shared a close bond. Robert and his grandfather occasionally went to the shooting range together, so he packed 2 weapons and a large amount of ammunition into his car. His aunt assured him that his mother wasn't living at his grandfather's house, but in a trailer elsewhere. This reassured Robert, as he wanted to avoid any interaction with his mother. Knowing it would lead to an argument, confident he wouldn't encounter Toshia, Robert drove to his grandfather's house. Robert parked at the end of the driveway and carried his weapon. Intending to show it to his grandfather, they briefly discussed ammunition. And during their conversation, Robert handed the weapon to his grandfather. According to Robert, his grandfather then walked into the house with the weapon, and Robert followed. Expecting that they might check for compatible ammunition, Robert recounted that when he entered the house behind his grandfather, the latter immediately began to attack with the weapon. Robert claimed that, from his position behind Curtis, he saw his mother sitting at the table and witnessed his grandfather kill her. His grandfather suddenly snapped, prompting him to panic and flee the house. Fearing for his life, however, the defense provided no clear motive as to why Curtis would have committed the murders. The trial lasted 8 days and included nearly 200 pieces of evidence. Both Curtis's shoes and Robert's shoes were covered in blood. The testimonies of Curtis and Robert contradicted each other, however. The jury confirmed that there was a lie in the testimony, according to Robert's friend and the arms dealer. The rifle used in the murder belonged to Robert. In fact, he had brought it to the Curtis house, and Robert still had bullets when fled. The jury deliberated for 2 full days on the first day. The jurors grew so tired after 5 hours of reviewing evidence that they requested to pause for the night, when they resumed the next day. They unanimously agreed on all 6 charges in the indictment. The jury found Robert Denton guilty of first-degree murder. The jury recommended a life sentence for Robert. With no possibility of parole for at least 51 years, Robert continues to claim his innocence. He is currently serving his sentence at the Turney Center Industrial Complex in Tennessee, the Millhorn. Children are still being cared for by family members.